Hey everybody, and welcome back to Ready Steady Podcast. This is the Ready Steady Play podcast about board games and board games that we've been playing. This is episode 30, and as usual, I'm joined by Barry to talk about some games.
Hello, hello. I'm a little dishevelled after the weekend of playing in the expo, but I can assure you that this is a genuine shirt and not pyjamas for those of you watching at home.
Yep, if you're watching the video component, you'll be able to go and check out Barry's pajamas. And if you're just listening, then you'll have to imagine it.
Stop imagining it.
We've got a packed episode for you today. We'll come back from UKGE, so we're going to take a brief foray through the news. We'll talk about some stuff that we've seen that's taken our interest, and then we'll get into games we bought at the convention, things like that. We'll talk about the games we played at the convention. I think we're going to start with the games that we played that are sort of full games that are either coming out very soon or already out. So we got to play what is functionally the final version before we move into the games we played that are pre-launch. So not yet available, but maybe coming to Kickstarter or crowdfunding or just coming to retail in due course. And we've got some exciting titles in there as well. I'm going to talk about The Fate of the Fellowship. Barry played it on BGA, didn't care for it. I played it in real life, and I'll tell you what I thought. And Barry is going to be talking about all kinds of things, including Black Metro and Seven Wonders Dice, which we were talking about on the Hype episode. So that's exciting. But first, a correction.
Us get something wrong? I don't believe it.
So this was on the episode 29 where we talked about the Spiel des Jahres nominees. I said that the Spiel des Jahres will be announced at Essenspiel in October. Apparently that's wrong. Apparently it is now awarded in July in Berlin, which might actually be true. I can't remember. There is it is, I'm sure it is true. This person wouldn't have just made something up. But there is a little press event at Essenspiel where we go and they talk through all the Spiel des Jahres and things like that. I mean, maybe once upon a time that was the actual awards, but now it seems it happens in July so that publishers can get the Spiel des Jahres award printed on the games and things like that in time for Essen and Christmas. So that was commented by Julian-D4N. So thanks for that. And thanks for the correction.
Never make a mistake again.
I will not. Unless, of course, it's wrong, and then I'll have to correct it next episode.
Yeah, it turns out you were right the first time.
I didn't fact check the commenters, so maybe I should have done that. But moving swiftly on, Barry's going to tell us about the news.
So in the news this week, a couple of new Kickstarters I spotted that looked interesting. First one of those is Darkleaf Gambit. Darkleaf Gambit is an odd one in that the game requires that you have a chess set. You may think, well, is this just a chess variant? And to some degree, perhaps, but imagine a whole game that just happens to use chess pieces. So you've got your chessboard, you are warring factions, as you know, chess has tried to abstract for many hundreds of years. But each of your pieces now has unique powers, can get upgrades, collect parts on the board. You use dice for different polyhedral dice, 4, 6, or 8 sided. You can acquire power, and then you play to not just take the king, but to defeat the other side, whatever that may be. And then there's multiple factions which you can play using the same pieces. Now this looked all very interesting when I first saw it, and then I had a look, and the game doesn't actually come with the chess board, right? So you don't have the pieces, and I get it to some degree. Everybody, well, maybe not everybody, but a lot of people will have a chess set, and a lot of people probably have a very nice chess set, and they might want to use their pieces for that. However, selling a game that doesn't contain the game is a little bit of a stretch, and by the time you get it into the UK, including sort of shipping and tax, you're looking at paying about £65 for something you can't play out of the box. And it just seems like an odd decision. I get the appeal of using a chessboard and chess pieces in a different way, and all the pieces that surround it look really, really nice, but I just would have thought they would have to give you the game within the box itself.
I mean, I guess I'm surprised there isn't a chess set add-on here.
And there's also, you can't even buy one should you want it. I mean, that does seem to be missing a trick. Chess sets are relatively inexpensive to produce, depending on how nice a copy you want. But that's there. If you want to check it out, it should still be up on Kickstarter for you to back at the moment.
Yeah, it's interesting. It claims to be an entirely new game for your chess set, and you pick 2 factions out of the box. There's like sort of 4, 5, 6 factions, and they add sort of asymmetrical powers and abilities and goals. So it seems, it says it's an entirely new game, so presumably all the rules about how the chess pieces move and operate are gone. And that's interesting. I kind of agree with Barry, though. It seems a bit odd to have a game that utilizes your chess components and says it's a whole new game that doesn't care about the rules of chess, and then it's the price of a game. Like,
correct.
Is the usage of the chess pieces just a cost-saving measure, right? It comes with a ton of chips, which so couldn't the chips just be
tokens?
The tokens? I don't understand really the thought process behind that. Anyway, it's 2-player only. It says it takes 30 to 45 minutes, maybe. Don't know, but looks interesting. Although I'm not sure if I'm necessarily tempted by it.
Yeah, and if they're not using chess piece movement, again, you could have had standees on a checkered board. You could have had not the lovely looking poker chips, but instead just cardboard circles. It's an interesting decision. Let's see how it plays out for them.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, let me just double check if it's been funded yet. Yeah, it has been funded. Did fairly low stretch goal. It's funded.
It has been funded. It does have a very low goal, though, for a game with this many dice and poker chips, so that's something to be conscious of, I suppose. Editor Mike just jumping in here after the fact to highlight that Darkleaf Gambit is available to play for free on Tabletopia at the moment. So if you want to give it a try, you can go and check it out there.
But that was something that caught my eye. Additionally, on Kickstarter at the moment, and should also still be available to back, because I'm sure you're listening to this podcast as it comes out, is a game that was quite popular at the Expo, and that is Trouble on the Tempus. So this is a cooperative game where you are surviving things on your spaceship going horribly wrong. What you have is an action phase, a consequence phase, and potentially a disaster phase with that. But if it all goes too wrong, you can cause a paradox, go back in time and try and fix it. So it was I didn't get a chance to play the whole thing. I'd seen it set up a couple of times and watched it a little bit. People that I know have played it have said it was quite good fun. I'm not sure if anybody's backing it at this point, but it is there and it does seem to be quite good. And you get the whole game in the box. So there's a plus.
So it's a cooperative game where you're playing as this team of spaceship crew, and you're trying to, I guess, this is just what I'm picking up from looking at it. Yeah. It looks like you're sort of doing crisis management on the ship, and I guess you can time travel back in time to try and fix it if things get wrong. Yeah,
if you like cooperative games, if you like the idea of being able to fix poor decisions later on in a board game, then this could be one for you. And then a couple of future-looking reprints. So within the Feld line, you may know that a lot of his games are being printed or reprinted by Queen in different cities around the world, so within the cities line. And a couple of newest ones mentioned are Manila, which re-implements Amerigo, and Beijing, which re-implements In the Year of the Dragon. So these are both slightly older games, and both games that I quite enjoy. However, I don't know if I enjoy them enough to get over the hump that is whatever price Queen Games are going to publish them at, and for the components that they're going to use in the box.
Yeah.
We played Amerigo. I had a good time with it. I did want to play it again, but obviously a little difficult to get. So the fact that it is coming back into print is good. Year of the Dragon I've played a few times and I've enjoyed it. I don't think I'm particularly good at it necessarily, but I wouldn't mind playing again. Like I say, I just don't know if I'm going to pay the Kickstarter cost of whatever Queen Games puts it out as and to sit through one of their Kickstarters or crowdfunding efforts.
Yeah, so Amerigo is one I own. I have that. It's sort of a game of discovery, and it uses this action rondel, which is quite interesting. That's adding sort of cubes that are changing the state of the rondel. And you're functionally playing sort of a game of resource capturing by investigating these islands and building onto the islands to capture the resources there. And there's, I don't want to say area control, but that kind of vibe as you're securing the resources on the islands for your own use. It is a competitive game. And then there's also these pirates that will come at you, and you have to manage that threat as well. And then I think there's some upgrade cards, one of which lets you like become the pirate captain. You don't have to worry about that anymore, so that's fun. But yeah, I like Amerigo. I think it's really really neat. I'm pleased to see it back in print. I'm not the biggest fan of Queen Games' Feldline, largely because it seems like most of the price that they're charging for the games is the cost of the name Steffenfeld, rather than going into the components you're receiving, or indeed a good quality rule book. So that's a shame. But at least it's back in print. People can get it if they want it. I've not played Year of the Dragon, so I can't comment on that one.
Yeah, I think it's pretty good. The only thing I can particularly remember off the top of my head, though, is you've got the 12 rounds, which represent the year, and you're sort of drafting people to come, like, work for you, kind of thing. So whether they're raising money or gaining rice to those kind of things. And then there's an event that's triggered at the end of every month, so every round, where you'll get money or points or whatever your income is, but you've also got to overcome that event if it's being attacked or whatever else. So it was good, but I've not played it recently, so I can't particularly remember, but I don't think it's been easily in print for a while, and again, if coming back, if more people like it and get involved in it, the better, because the previous versions, an older design, shall we say, in terms of look and feel for how modern board games are, and at least, for all their faults, Queen Games at least is modernising some of these older ones. Not always to the better.
I only engaged with the sort of the first round of the City series, and then immediately kind of lost interest. And it might partly be because of the price. It's partly because I don't think the Queen Games productions are the best. And it's probably also because I'm not like the biggest Steffenfeld fan. I like a lot of his designs. I really like Castles of Burgundy a lot, but it's a great game. I like Amerigo. I'm just thinking about like others that I've got. I've played quite a few of them, but not nearly as many as there are. I really like the new one, Civolution. I thought Civolution was great. I was cool on Marrakesh, which was the new one in the very first round of the City Games. Of course, there's been another like 8 since then. And I was never like the biggest fan of Bruges, which everyone really liked.
Mm-hmm.
I do really like Civolution. I think that's great. But it's nice to see them in print and things like that. But I'm not necessarily convinced that the Queen Games production is. Oh my God, there's a cat.
The best home for it. Cat tax.
There's a cat in the podcast room. How did you get in here? That door was shut.
Cat skills.
So our final article for the news is the sale of the Eric Lang series. Do they have a name? Does this series have a name?
Not that I know of.
Well, it is the triptych that Lang produced for Cool Mini or Not, Blood Rage, Rising Sun, and Ankh. They're sort of historical, mythological, fight soldiers on a map style war games. They're all fairly different, and Lang has stated that he pulled inspiration from different classic games to inspire them. But of course, you will at least have heard of Blood Rage because of its incredible popularity, and Ankh because of its incredible polarity. But CMON has been sitting on them for a while, refusing to run the Kickstarter campaigns again because of their commitment to honoring their crowdfunding exclusive model. But they did reprint Blood Rage, and in order to run that campaign one more time, they resculpted all of the miniatures. So they all kept the same rules, but none of the figures were the same. In any case, I guess CMON has completely written off doing anything further with the 3 sets, which is fair enough. They do tend not to revisit their older Kickstarter campaigns unless with a very specific reason, or that was always the intention. But they've now sold them all to Tabletop Tycoon, a publisher in the States that owns a number of smaller studios, including Starling Games, who produced Everdell, Victory Point Games, who produced the Dawn of the Zeds that we like, and Sparkworks and Flying Meeple as well. So they've acquired from CMON Blood Rage, Rising Sun, Ankh, as well as Arcadia Quest and Starcadia Quest. Have you played those two?
I've not. They were quite popular for a time with my group, but I never really got along with the chibis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very cute little dungeon crawlery type games, but I never played them.
No, I cannot tell you anymore.
In any case, it'll be interesting to see what Tabletop Tycoon does with them. Of course, they've run Kickstarters before, or at least their studios have. Starling Games, of course, have kickstarted Everdell like 4 times. So it'll be interesting to see. They've said, they've flat out stated they're looking forward to reissuing, remastering, and extending these games. So it seems to be the case that you might be getting more Blood Rage, more Ankh, and more Rising Sun. It is unclear whether any new products would be compatible with the existing material, and what remastering means as well. I don't know if Eric Lang has any intention of working with Tabletop Tycoon. There's been, as far as I'm aware, no comment on that at all. Have you played the Lang trilogy?
I've not played Ankh. Played a reasonable amount of Blood Rage. Rising Sun I never got along with because of the negotiation elements in the game. But Blood Rage I've enjoyed when I played.
Yeah, so Blood Rage I've played all 3 a fair amount. I really like Blood Rage. Blood Rage, I think, has the right amount of additional content. It doesn't have a huge amount, and most of the content is just additional variability, but it's a sort of a solid package. I'm not sure if it could benefit from further expansions, and I don't know if it needs further variability, but I'm sure there are groups out there that have played so much Blood Rage they're dying for more monsters. Rising Sun, I kind of feel the same way, and also, again, like there's not sort of big box expansions or anything like that for Rising Sun. It is a longer game. It's probably the longest of the 3, and it has sort of 2 phases. A phase where you are negotiating alliances, and you can break your alliances and team up again. Lang said he was trying to channel some diplomacy into the negotiation phase. And then a second phase where you're doing an area control game based on the alliances you made in the first round as well. And I really like it. I definitely guess it's not for everyone. There's also some capacity to stab your allies in the back, which is quite amusing. But again, it doesn't feel like it wants a lot more content or like a big box expansion or something like that. And the reason I'm thinking about this is because Ankh, which is the shortest of the 3, I think suffered from its big box expansion. It's the only one, I think, that has an expansion that really adds a major new component, whereas the other 2, the expansions added like higher player count, additional monsters, asymmetrical player powers. Blood Rage had that thing where you could put gods out into the territories, and the territories have little extra powers now. No significant new mechanisms, but Ankh is another area control game with some really interesting mechanisms, but it had a big box expansion that added a separate board with a new action you could take, where you were taking actions on the separate board and developing asymmetrical player powers. And it took what was a really fun, punchy, fast game and just slowed it right down. And now everybody had to read everyone's powers. And I think it's terrible. I would never play with the Pantheon expansion in Ankh, and I really like Ankh. So I don't know if there's a lot of room for more expansions in these lines. I'm interested to see what Tabletop Tycoon are hoping to do with them. I'm also interested to see whether or not Eric Lang will work with them moving forward. I don't think he's ever expressed a major desire to return to these. titles, especially because he worked at CMON long after they all, or at least for a while after they all came out. And when they reissued Blood Rage, he was still working there, and they didn't create any additional content for the game. So Lang has had plenty of opportunity to revisit these and hasn't. So, it'll be interesting to keep an eye on Tabletop Tycoon, see what they do with it. But this sale also fits into a larger picture where people are talking about CMON going bankrupt. And I do think there are two potential takes on this. One is that they're desperate and they're selling their assets because they're desperate. The other take, I think, is that they've sold as much of these 3 games or 5 games as they think they can. Obviously, I'm not talking much about Arcadia and Starcadia because I'm less familiar with them. I don't know if there's been people out there dying for a reprint of those. They certainly seem like, I mean, to be fair, Blood Rage has been quite available at retail, as has the Rising Sun and Ankh core sets. It's just all the Kickstarter exclusives that they don't make readily available, right?
Yeah.
But CMON have not shown much interest in continuing to explore these properties or do more with them. And now they've sold the rights. One argument could be made that they're in financial trouble. They need the money from the sales to stay afloat. The other argument is they believe the well is dried up and they're just happy to take Tabletop Tycoon's money, or it could be a bit of both. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
No, I mean, like you said, they don't revisit the stuff that they publish, so selling it on makes both financial sense and, from either side of what you're thinking, whether it is because they need the money because they announced that big loss this year, or whether it's because, well, actually, it's the end of its lifetime, we're never going back to it, let's just make some extra cash.
Yeah, fair enough.
Time will play out, we'll find out in the course of the future.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how CMON continue to manage. I haven't seen them publish any campaigns for a little while, but they have had as well some pre-orders for June or for Arrakis. So they're in mid-production on a huge number of things as well, I think. Or at least in delivery on those things. I guess they're hoping to avoid the tariffs as much as possible. So it'll be interesting to see how they manage with that going forward, and whether or not they are in as much financial trouble as everyone seems to think they are.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's it for the news, because otherwise we have been busy.
Indeed, we have. We've been incredibly busy at the UK Games Expo.
Did you have a good time this year?
I did, yeah. I did have a good time at the UK Games Expo. It was so busy. It just felt like it was over in a flash, and I'm just sitting there trying to figure out what happened.
What just happened? It was bigger this year. It was busier this year, but not in a worse way. For me, overall, it was certainly better this year than last year. Obviously, we said a couple of times on the podcast that last year after coming back, I wasn't sure if I wanted to go again, and then this year I went, and actually it was a pretty good time, all things considered. I was able to get in at more things, see more things, play more things. I felt less busy, even though the attendance numbers continue to rise. I think there was 45,000 uniques this year versus 38 or so last year, and 72,000 in total. And so I saw more than all the things that I spoke about last podcast, but less than I had planned. Really needs a fourth day now to see everything. And rumours are that next year it'll be 5 halls, and so no way you're getting around all that. And technically it was 5 halls this year, but they didn't really use the hall 1. But 5 halls next year for exhibiting. Yeah,
I mean, we were talking about, will it only be getting bigger from here on out? And it seems like, the answer is absolutely yes. Because they had, for people that don't go, apologies, this is going to seem a bit like banal logistics, but they did have Hall 1, and then they lost Hall 1 this year, and then they got it back again. So in the end, Hall 1 was just tickets and the bring and buy, which was actually really good because it got the bring and buy out of the area it used to be in Hall 2, which meant that, and that was always a bit of a logistical issue because the bring and buy always has huge queues of people buying and dropping off games. And so actually putting it into Hall 1 and giving it a huge amount of its own space was really helpful because it kind of got it out the way and let people access it more easily. And that was great. So they used 2, 3, and 4, Halls 2, 3, and 4 for their open play, competitive games, and publisher booths, and, anyone else who had stalls there. And actually, that space was really nice because it kind of forms like a contiguous area. And you could technically walk all the way from Hall 1 to Hall 4. But the other thing that's notable is that to get from Hall 1 to Hall 2, you have to climb a flight of stairs. And those stairs always get really, really packed. It's kind of a bottleneck. And furthermore, it's stairs, so it's not the most accessible thing for people with mobility issues. So it was really nice that by moving all the stuff most people are into Halls 2, 3, and 4, you can actually just walk right through them all if they're all opened up. And that was really nice, actually. I thought that it just made it made a better space overall. Now, I don't know how much planning had gone into the organization of the map and the layout, but that was as unintelligible as it's always been.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's not an improvement, but it's not necessarily worse either. It's just, a mystery, and that's fine, I guess.
The halls merging together, like, Hall 2, you got to the corner and then you were in Hall 3, but then Hall 3 and 3A just are the same space before kind of going around the corner again into Hall 4.
Yeah, well, I still don't really know what Hall 3A is. We decided it meant the outside, like all the A stalls seem to be touching the wall.
No, 3A is the right-hand side of Hall 3 as you face them. If you think you're going in, there's like 2 entrances into Hall 3. So the one on the right was 3A.
Interesting. For those that attend. There you go. There's a fact for you for next year. If it's the same, if they've got Hall 5 as well, that's going to be crazy. They'll fill it, though. I think they will.
They did a lot better with the spacing between the booths this year. There was a lot more room to move around. There's a lot more room just to look at things as you're squeezing by. Managed to see quite a lot, but it was still too big to really get around in the sort of 2.5 days worth of hall time that I spent there. But there's so many other things to do at the expo. I went to the couple of shows, went to the Terry Pratchett sort of comedy show thing, the Dark Room for the first time, never been before, and they couldn't switch the lights off, so it was the slightly less bright room when I went to see it, but it was still a really good time. John Robertson there doing good work. Managed to trade some bets. I saw a couple of people from the Discord, from the Ready Steady Play Discord. That was good. And overall, spent more time in the halls and played far less than previous years, but still had a good time. And you're also now looking at the second place Forest Shuffle UK player. So the Forest Shuffle UK Championships. But I will say they did only use the first expansion, so Wolves and Deer were still quite dominant. New expansion was stuck at Netherlands or something. I was hoping to pick it up, but never made it through customs in time. Although they did have demos, a demo version on one of the Asmodee stands, along with Dartmoor, the new UK
the new version
base game.
Yeah.
Which just left and right. It's no up and downs on the moors. It's all very flat. Let me tell you a tale though. Now, if maybe you can put this in the Patreon exclusive segment. So coming second in the tournament. So the guy that won, he didn't own Forest Shuffle or anything. He was given his prizes: copy of Forest Shuffle, the expansion, some like exclusive bits and pieces. Everybody in the top table got the promos, sort of new promos that were out, and ones that were hard to get a hold of. And then I came second. So the other prizes that were there were the new expansion. There was a t-shirt with a fox on it. The promos. There was a t-shirt with a butterfly on it. The promos. Who do you think gets to pick next?
Well, second place.
That's right, the person in fourth. So they walked away with a new expansion, which you couldn't get a hold of now because it was stuck in the customs. Right, fine. And then the guy that was third got next pick, so he got the fox t-shirt, which was pretty cool. And I was left with the butterfly t-shirt, which, as you can imagine, quite a butterfly kind of guy. In the end, whatever. I'm not super fussed. I wasn't expecting anything, and I'll buy the expansion. It's not a huge deal, but it was just an odd way to go about organising a tournament, which is equally odd as he ran it last year as well. So that's something to bear in mind should you go to the Forest Shuffle 2026 Championships.
Well, there you go. Why don't you sign up for next year and see if you can beat Barry?
Impossible. I can't possibly
lose.
Deer
strat. He's unbeatable.
Yeah. We had also finished all our games in like record time, and then because you have to wait for other tables to finish, it was just sitting about twiddling your thumbs.
Are they all four-player games?
Yeah, this year I think most of the tables were 4-player. Last year we had to go between like 3 and 5 depending on who was there, but no, it was a good time anyway. Like, it was a good time. I won with a record low score of 68, which is unprecedented. In the same round, the tables that were taking forever finished with like scores of 200 or whatever, but it just so happened like our table was really cutthroat in terms of what they were doing and getting rid of the clearing and stuff. It's a good game. You should play it more, Mike.
Well, do you know, my copy went in the UKGE bring and buy.
Ah, sad.
I'm not. It's okay. We went around, we demoed a lot of stuff. Usually I rock up to these things with a pretty tight schedule. That's that's pretty much the whole weekend. But it was nice. We got to play some games in the evenings and catch up with, some friends from. I got to catch up with some friends from London and things like that. But also some of the people we know from the industry who we don't get to see very often. So that was really nice. I guess the only things I'd mention really was that I did manage to find time to sit down and play Seven Empires, which is the Matt Gertz game. I don't know if I've actually covered it on the podcast. This is a sort of streamlined, pared down version of Imperial, in the the third in the trilogy, so to speak, with Imperial and Imperial 2030 being the other two, which are more about the economy and more about money. And they're more about sort of the nations having their own banks and you spend money to control the nations. But the core conceit of these games, of course, is that you're acquiring shares. So you've got all these countries warring on a map. Looks a bit like Risk. But instead of any one player being a country, so you're not like the red player like in Risk or France, like you might be in another type of game like this, you are just buying shares in a country, and when you have the most shares in that country, you get to control it, and if someone else gets more shares than you, they take control of it. And at the end of the game, you're going to get points based on how many shares you have in the country and how well they've done. So you want the countries that you have a lot of shares in to do well. So there's a question of, do you hedge or do you go all in on something that you really care about? Stuff like that. Really interesting series of games, and one of the things I particularly like about Seven Empires, which which gets rid of all of the money, and so now what you've got is this sort of concept of the civilization or the different countries scoring points during the game. So you can sort of like expand your empire and things like that, or you can stop and score a bunch of points, but then you don't get to take any other action. You only get one action around anyway. And there's also this mechanism where if you control multiple countries, because you have the most shares in 2 countries, other players, because there's only 7 empires split amongst a number of players. Some players might have 2, some players might have 0 or 1. And if it comes around to your turn and you've acted with all of your empires, then you get to act with an empire that you have the second most shares in. And so you might actually take actions away from players who are expecting to have them, which is really interesting and fun. So it's just a really sort of dynamic and crazy game. And I got to play a 5-player game of that. And I really like it. It's really good. It looks bad. It looks like, like most of Matt Gertz's games, but
I don't think it looks too bad.
At least it's functional and clear. We'll give it that.
I've seen worse looking games.
Yeah, true. It's not going to grab anyone's attention. And when people see it on the table, they'll think they know what kind of game it is. But yeah, so I got to play that with a bunch of friends, and that was really nice. And then on the Sunday, I got to play Arcs again. I hadn't played Arcs since last GridCon, which was in November. And I was reminded about how good it is. It's really quite a polarizing game because it's hyper aggressive, and there's not really any capacity for sort of playing it safe. Nothing is secure. and very occasionally you might take a big risk with your dice and it won't pay off. People will tell you that that's just swinging luck, but no, you made those decisions that got you there. You know, you were accountable. It's definitely not just a lot. It's definitely not a game that's luck driven, even though you might feel that way, because also you just get a hand of action cards and then you have to work within that hand. You can't do whatever you want all the time. It's crazy, but I really, really like it. I think it's great. I really enjoyed that play of it.
Nice. Well, I guess what you've probably been seeing online is everybody's haul of games that they bought while there. I am not too different. Nothing massive purchased from me, but I did pick up a few bits and pieces, mostly smaller games. So Button Shy were there. They had a stand. They were selling a lot of their games. Sometimes it's quite hard to get Button Shy games here in the UK, and particularly in any volume. Often they're sold out by the time you realise that they've done a printing and shipped it over. So I picked up a couple of solo games. First one of that is Food Chain Island, where animals trying to eat each other on the island. That was good. Played that a few times. I did win on my first time out, but I have since not managed to completely get down to one animal since. And Rove, which is results-oriented vehicle or something along those lines. That's very good. I had a very good time with that. There's a whole bunch of expansions that I think I might look into. I don't necessarily need them right now because the modules that I have are quite interesting, but I can see where that would be good fun with alternative modules. And Skulls of Sedlec, which is a 2 to 3 player game. I'd say 2 player if you've only got one copy of the game. It's decent, but it has about 40 expansions, and I don't know why that's not a big box game at the moment, but you're really just drafting cards and putting them into your pyramid tableau and trying to get them in certain positions to score points. Quite straightforward, but fully functional and really interesting what you can do with just 18 cards, I would say. So I bought those. I got Station to Station, which is a lightweight delivery train game. It's not really a pick up and deliver because you can pick up at every stop and you can really get anything you want. So it's more a delivery game. It was good. Not super sure about the longevity of the game. It might have it might be worth playing over and over again. I don't know. The fact that you can pick up whatever you want every turn is just the sort of limiting factor. Like, you can always get what you want, but is it worth it? We'll see whether that can play out over multiple games and still be fun. Picked up Ancient Knowledge, which isn't a new one, but I've been playing it on Board Game Arena. Quite enjoyed it, so got it for real life. I was in the queue picking up my tickets on the Thursday afternoon, Thursday evening, and there was a guy sort of maybe, 12 spaces behind me that looked like he was taking his stuff to the bring and buy. So I kept an eye on him, and as we're twisting around the queue, I was like, "Are you taking that to the bring and buy?" And he's like, "Yeah." He goes, "Oh, how much you want?" And so I just bought it off him before he put it into the bring and buy. Saved a lot of time there by not having to go around. Played it whilst I was there. 4-player, really good. I'll pick up the expansion. It just adds a few extra cards. Yeah, kind of game I enjoy. Faffing about with tokens on cards. Flip 7, I did pick up. That's a good, fun, lightweight game. Just push your luck, trying to get points without going bust.
This was nominated for something or won an award for something, isn't that right? Spiel des Jahres.
Spiel, wasn't it? Yeah, it was between that and Bombbusters, I'm sure, in the same category. And I'm like, well, Bombbusters should win that.
Well, to be fair, there are very different types of games and very different weights. Everyone had Flip 7. I got to play it twice.
Because it's fun.
Because it's tiny.
The third printing of the games now come in a small box because it's only 88 cards. Like, there's nothing else to it. And you get a box that's, a foot long. And it's like, there's no reason for this box to be anywhere near this big. So the newest printing has gone to be a small sort of tuck box style delivery, which is a much better idea, if you ask me.
Yeah, I enjoyed Flip 7. It's just pure, like, hit and stick. And that's it. But it got me thinking about, we were talking about, deep regrets and talking about push your luck. And Flip 7 is push your luck, but it's not got a whole lot of information to go on. Mm-hmm. Really, all you can do is card count and kind of pray, and that's about it. But it's so fast, and because, you either hit or you stick or you go out, and that's basically it. it's so fast, it's so punchy, it's really satisfying. I think it's to be fair, one of the guys I was playing with was so unlucky. He kept going out almost immediately. It was really funny for everyone else, but I'm not sure how he felt about him, which was maybe unfortunate because it was his copy of the game. But it is just like that. And then the other thing is there's this multiplier card, which is just pure nonsense. It just multiplies your hand. And that can give you an incredible runaway score really easily. And I was dwelling on whether or not I thought that was a good thing to include in the game. But then as I watched my friend get eliminated round after round, and we were all approaching like 100 points, it's first 200, right? And he was still on 0. I was like, maybe it is good they put the multiplier in there.
Yeah, we've only hit the multiplier on somebody that was behind so far, but it has the same chance of coming out for somebody who's ahead. And so, sure. But the game is heavily luck-based. It's not terribly feels bad if somebody beats you, so I'm fine with it.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, there's really very little actual skill in the game, so you can't feel too bad if someone's ahead or behind.
I was hoping to play in the Flip 7 tournament next year.
Well, you let me know how you get on.
Yep.
We all want to hear about your training regime and what tactics you're developing.
Sometimes I would hit, sometimes I would stick. See what happened. Picked up another solo game that was 20 strong from Chip Theory Games, who were there. Came with the original Solar Sentinels, which is in the core box, and Hoplomachus and Too Many Bones. I've played that a few times. It's been okay. I'll play it a bit more before I come to any conclusions on that one. But Chip Theory Games were also selling coffee, which I have purchased. So I'll let you know in the future if that was any good as well.
Is it waterproof coffee?
No. Yeah, just
it's probably for the best.
You can reuse it. And then I went to All Play's stand, which I think was one of the best stands at the show. Their shelves were excellent, pushing games forward as you took one out. Everything was on display brilliantly. They had loads of little tables with all their games set up. I'm sure it was expensive to get that much space, but it was a great example of what you could do if you were willing to spend it, I suppose. But I purchased Mountain Goats, which is another fun sort of push your luck style game. Played that on Board Game Arena a bit, and then I got to the counter and they're like, "Oh, do you want the 5-player expansion?" I was like, "Yes, I want the 5-player expansion." And I'm sure they were just getting those upsells the whole weekend. I also picked up Alibi, which is one that I mentioned in the last podcast, but I've not yet played that. Should be fun. Also picked up Pina Coladice, which I've not played yet either, but that looks like fun. Also push your luck. Maybe that's the theme for the year. Got Message in a Bottle, which is just, I was looking for a word game. That's been really fun to play. I've not won a game yet, but that's okay as well. But you shake up some dice that have letters on it, and then you got to try and make a word. If another player can come in, use all the letters, but make a shorter word, they can steal the point from you. So you can't just always go anti-disestablishmentarianism and then just hope to win the point. But I'm enjoying that so far and hope to play it some more. Then picked up Timber Town, which is 2-player tile drafting and tableau building type game. I've not played it yet, so I'll let you know if that's any fun. And then sort of maybe, potentially, the game of the con is another light one. Tacta, that was also everywhere, the same as Flip 7. Did you get a chance to play Tacta?
I did not.
It is very good. They were giving away free 2-player versions of the game, and you can incorporate that into the main game to go up to 8 players. And Tacta is just a card placement game where you're all sharing whatever size table you're on. Each card has different shapes on it that you can lay on top of shapes on cards that are already down. Each card has pips on it, and what you're trying to do is at the end of the game have the most pips showing. I don't know if that comes across as making sense, but visually, anybody will get it in seconds. Like if you teach that to somebody, they could be playing immediately. You don't even need to teach them the rules, really. It's just like the corner goes on the triangle, the square corner goes on the square, The short edge goes on the bits that are short, and the long edge goes on the bits that are long. And that is 80% of the rules. You can only cover one card at a time, but then you just won't have the most pip showing at the end. If you're the first person to put down like a 4 pip long one, somebody's going to come along and cover that with their one, and then they get the 4 points and you don't get the points. Played it a few times, demoed it on the stand, and then bought it later that day. Highly recommend it. That was all my purchases. Nothing big this year. No crazy Kickstarter stuff, no crazy exclusives, no big box games.
Just keeping it easy breezy and accessible.
Exactly. I've got a lot of big games. I don't get to play them enough as is. Having something I can just bust out and we can play 4 or 5 of them in an evening is a change of pace.
I did not buy very much, mainly because I'm working on buying equipment for the studio, so that's my priority over sort of picking up games.
And how can people support that endeavor, Mike?
If you would like to see the live streams and the edited content vastly improved and continuing to improve, and if you want to support this content and this independent coverage, you can always check us out on Patreon. We do play a lot of async BGA games over there. I'm always happy to jump in and teach you something on BGA if I know how to play. So you can always check that out and benefit from being part of the community and the discussion. And, you can ask us questions. We'll address them on the podcast, or if there's something you want to see us cover, you can always let us know that as well. In any case, I only actually bought one thing, which was FlickFleet, a box of pirate flicks. So if you don't know anything about FlickFleet, I did live stream it with Michael some time ago. You can still find that live stream up on the channel. We live streamed that for their box of Xenos campaign, which I think was campaign 2 or 3 for FlickFleet, but it is largely distributed either at cons like this or via crowdfunding. But it is a dexterity game set in space where you flick little ships around, and then the ships flick. They shoot at each other by flicking dice. So you flick a die at another ship, and this has the effect of you need to hit the ship with the die to hit it, but then also you need to roll a number on it, which you've done, which is great. It's just a really nice little system that's very exciting and fun. The game is, so the FlickFleet is designed by Jackson Pope and Paul Wilcox, but Box of Pirates is like a new faction. So originally it was just the 2 factions, like the Rebels and the Empire, but now it's got a new faction, which are the Pirates. And this is because originally the Pirates were sort of like factionless ships that either side could recruit, but the community liked them so much they just actually designed a bunch of their own. And so Jack and Paul went to work with the community to sort of develop an entire faction with a bunch of new ships. And they're like, well, this could be a disaster because, the fans aren't exactly developers, but they said that they had a bunch of really good ideas. And so they've been able to develop this. And as a result, also, there's a third designer credited, M. Yeager, who maybe is one of the fans that was more involved. I'm not sure, or maybe their own designer, I'm not sure. But the credited artists on the box are R.H. Adley and Jackson Pope. The publisher who makes this is Eurydice Games, and it is a 2-player game, although I think you can play 3 and 4 if you have the Pirates or the Xenos. But it doesn't, if you only have 2 factions, you can't really play more than 2 players unless you're doing teams. It says here it takes 10 to 30 minutes to play. That depends. The thing is, it's one of those games where you can throw in as many ships as you want. So you could definitely play it in 10 minutes if you had 1 or 2 ships each. You could also make a 2-hour game out of it if you used tons of ships and had a big epic fight, right? As I said before, it's just a dexterity game. You're flicking things around. What's kind of nice is all the ships have different stats and different abilities. They've been really creative about how they use the sort of the physicality and the space to make the ships and the factions feel unique and different. And they've been really good about how the sort of the ships sync up with the rules as well. Ships have shields and can take damage, and the way they sort of break down interacts with their capacity and how they work. It's great. I really like FlickFleet. I don't know why I don't play it all the time.
I've never played it. I need to see it in action. I'm going to watch some videos after this.
It is also made, so it isn't entirely made by Jack and Paul in their garage here in the UK. So they hand cut all the pieces and make it themselves and package it themselves at their house. Now,
Okay.
that means that it is quite expensive to buy. You can get just the STLs and print it yourself if you want to. So if you are a 3D printer person, this is a game that you can purchase relatively cheap and make yourself. You can print and play all of the components that are not the plastic parts. The guns themselves are just dice. You can get dice anywhere. It is relatively straightforward to reproduce that way. I do not have a 3D printer, and so I just buy the stuff that they make.
Fair. Cheaper than buying a 3D printer.
At this stage, I'm not entirely sure.
Fair.
But I just don't know if I want a 3D printer, Barry. But that's a whole conversation for another time.
Fair enough.
Well, that covers up all the stuff we bought.
But what did we play?
What did we play? Did you play anything interesting?
Arguably no, but I did play things. No, I did. So I'm not going to cover everything that I played. There was a lot of games there. A lot of things get in for like maybe a round or two just to see how they work. Played I said more this year than last year in terms of demos. Like last year I had real difficulties getting in at anything and trying to demo anything, and this year it seemed to be a lot better. I did get a bit bait and switch from Paverson Games on the Sunday rush to try and scan their demo for Class of 89, but they'd switched it out for an unannounced demo of something else. And it looked fine, but it wasn't Class of 89. So
was that the one with all the trees and the mountains?
Oh, the one with all the trees, yeah. And then I swung around, seeing their cocktail expansion. I definitely want to talk about that again at some point in the future. It almost could be its own game, right? That adds so much to what's going on. But I'm only going to talk about games that I managed to get enough of a playthrough of, either the whole thing or everything I kind of wanted to see about it, because there was still quite a lot of that going on. And one of the first things I'm going to talk about is Seven Wonders Dice. So mentioned that in the last podcast that was announced, part of the Seven Wonders family. So Repos Productions and Antoine Bauza, and the artist being Agnes Repoche. So Seven Wonders Dice is a roll and write. The unique element of this game is the shaker, is shaking the dice, right? So there's a bunch of resource dice and ability dice. So you've got your green science, your blue culture for points, your red military dice, and your gold money dice in a box. You give it a shake with the lid on. You reveal the lid, and then the quarter in which the dice finishes is how much that costs you to buy. So you only get to buy one dice per turn, but if it's in the 0 section, you get that dice for free. 1, 2, or 3, you pay the appropriate gold, and obviously you need to manage your gold to make sure you can buy the dice that you want at the time you want. As the game progresses and people move through their science track, so using the green dice, they will unlock the white dice, which is leaders, the black dice, which is cities, the purple dice, which is guilds, and they replace the basic resource dice in the shaker, but you can only use them if you've unlocked it on the science track. So, if somebody's lagging behind in the resource generation, you can, stuff them up a bit, force them to pay money for those additional resources by switching out one of those dice quickly that only you have access to. The resource generation in the game is a one and done. So once you've got ore, you'll always have ore. Once you've got brick, you'll always have brick. Once you get papyrus, you'll always have papyrus. And each space on the board that you're filling in has a requirement for a certain number of resources, varying between 0 for resources, but between 1 and 6. And so you want a full suite of your resources before to tick the higher value boxes. And then each box, like your blue for points, red for military, which you can attack or defend on, green for your science track to unlock new dice. Once you've got the purple dice, it's points. If you've got the most of whatever the purple dice asks for, you can get points on that track. The white leader dice gets you, depending what comes up on those dice, you can unlock more points. It's always points. And it was really boring. The interesting part was the rolling of the dice, and that's not what you want. The filling in the sheet, if that's the only sheet that's in the game, and it doesn't do anything different between now and publishing, you could play anything. Like literally any game would give you the same feeling. It's ticking boxes. There's a little bit of player interaction in terms of, can you switch out the resource dice once you've got it and they don't. But that's not terribly interesting because there's just as much chance that you don't have the resources by the time that happens. What dice you buy, you just, if you can use it, you're always tending towards the lower cost dice. Occasionally you'll buy a 3-cost one, but the game's so open that you can take any dice really and do something with it for the most part. The game ends once a player's filled in 3 of their segments on the board. So if you fill in all the blues, you get the bonus for that, and then once you fill in all the reds, you get the bonus for that. If there's nothing that you want with the dice, you can always fill in your wonder, the same way as in 7 Wonders. You can tuck a card under to build a stage of your wonder. And it was just so by the numbers. If you've played a roll and write that does anything around rolling a dice and scoring points, you've played this. And if there's not additional sheets that do something different, I can't recommend it. We were all kind of bored after we realised, this is the game, and that was after 3 or 4 rolls. Once we kind of got the rules internalised, and it just wasn't fun. So make of that what you will. I also don't enjoy Architects, but I do enjoy 7 Wonders, and I do enjoy 7 Wonders Duel.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not against a roll and write. I enjoy a number of roll and writes. In fact, I'm going to maybe make a roll and write just to enter the competition on Board Game Geek for 2025, just to see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
I like the genre.
Well, fair enough. I'm not a massive fan of roll and writes. There are a small number that I enjoy. But generally speaking, it depends entirely on for me, it's just the lack of player interaction,
Yeah.
I don't mind doing a roll and write if I'm by myself.
Yeah.
But that I'm very rarely on my own with time to play a solo game, and then I'll probably pick something that's more story driven anyway. I was going to say I do quite like 7 Wonders Architects. Like, I can appreciate the criticisms of it. What I like about it is it can play a lot of people simultaneously without increasing the game length, and it's very accessible.
Yeah.
But,
just pick a card from the middle every turn.
Well, it sounds completely different to 7 Wonder Dice.
Yeah, very, very different game. Both equally lacking in interesting decisions.
Well, the one thing I'll say about Architects is that it is better in real life than it is on BGA. Okay. Like, it is a thoroughly miserable experience on BGA. In real life, it's more interesting. I cannot explain exactly why. It is functionally the same thing, but there's something about the sort of tactile, real life nature of it that is more appealing.
Fair. I mean, I have played it in real life. Doesn't do anything extra for me.
That's fair enough.
Hopefully, games that you've played are slightly more upbeat.
We'll start off with Power Vacuum. It was on my list of ones I wanted to check out, and I was fortunate enough with a review copy of Power Vacuum. They did give me an demo copy, which was fortunate because the demo copies came with the deluxe pieces as well. So I got to have the deluxe pieces, and I'm only mentioning that because it's going to feature in what I'm talking about now. So this is a 2025 game. I don't believe it's widely available at retail. You could buy it at the convention. There's lots of copies, but I don't know how easy it is to find if you don't go to the publisher directly. So Power Vacuum is designed by Caleb Wenzel Fisher, and the art is by Malachi Ray Rempen, and the publisher is Keen Bean Studios, who have published games that the other two have worked on, including Crime Spree, Roll Camera, Itchy Feet. Power Vacuum plays 1 to 5. It says it plays 30 to 45 minutes on the box, which is actually pretty accurate. I think we played it in about an hour, maybe less. That included a teach. So it is a weird trick-taking game. Functionally, what you're doing is trying to score the most points, and at the end of the round, the points translate into statue pieces. It is thematically the power vacuum that is being left behind by the death of the leader. It is anthropomorphized kitchen appliances for the sake of a fun pun, because the leader that died was in fact a vacuum cleaner, leading behind a power vacuum, and now iron and Toaster and Microwave are all competing to become the new leader of the country. And you've got a board in the center of the table, which is a round board that features all of the characters. You'll play as one of the characters. You've got a little player board in front of you that represents them. And then you've got the power, which is electricity. Again, an additional pun. The integration of theme with pun is very appealing. So you've got the power, which is just little power tokens, but they are points. And so you're going to play a number of hands. Typically, it says 4 to 5 on the box is typical. I think we played 4 rounds and then the game ended. And at the end of each hand, you're going to score points. So you might score a point when you win a trick. You've actually got a choice. I'll talk about the choice later, but you could take a point. That's one way to get points. The only way to get points during a hand. At the end of the round, you'll get points based on how much power you've got by your little character at the table. You'll also get points for correctly predicted who has the most and the least power at the table with friendly ties. So if everyone had the same power, your predictions would be all correct, but they won't. Everyone starts with an equal amount of power at the beginning of a hand, and then this power balance is going to be upset by the trick-taking game. So the deck is 4 suits, numbered 1 to 9, and the 4 suits are, of course, the 4 pillars of government, which are media, currency, bureaucracy, and violence. And so you play it like a normal trick-taking game with someone playing a card from one of the suits, and everyone has to follow suit if they can, but they can, if they can't follow suit, they can ignore it. Violence is the trump suit. So if
that's fair,
yeah. Fair enough, right? Again, another wonderful integration of the theme in an amusing way. I really appreciate that. But then there's also 2 wrinkles. One is the spies. So the spies are a smaller suit numbered 4, 5, and 6, and the spies trump, but only if there is a trump. So they trump. So if somebody plays out a trump card, someone can later play a spy and they'll win the trick. But if they play the spy on its own without violence being present, then the spy doesn't do anything. So that's an interesting wrinkle. The other wrinkle is that the suits are actually printed on the back of the cards. So you can see what suits people have in hand, even though you don't know what their numbers are. And then the spies themselves are masquerading as the suits. So you might think someone has a trump card, or you might think they have a currency card, but it's actually a spy.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really interesting, and it made for some interesting trick-taking considerations. And then there's also this element of winning and losing, because if you win the trick, you've got 2 options. You either get the point, so you just take a power from the supply, that's your point. Or you can poach one of the cards from the trick, and it will be added to your hand in the next hand. So you don't get it for this round, but you'll get it next round. So you can sort of build a better hand for next round if you want to do that. And the reason you might want to do that is because in addition to someone winning the trick and getting those things, if you have the lowest number that was played into the trick, you get to influence the power balance. And it quickly becomes apparent that this is actually more desirable than winning the tricks. And obviously in a perfect world, you'd play the lowest number and win the trick. Like you'd play the only trump card and it's a 1. But that doesn't happen. That's difficult, or it does. It's not that it doesn't happen. It does, but it's tricky to pull off. But if you get the lowest number, you then have to do 2 things with the power balance. So you've got this circular board with everyone sat there, and 2 of them are connected by a plug. So each character sat on a desk, and the desk has a plug socket in it, and there is a cable that plugs in 2 of the characters. And so when you play the lowest number, the first thing you have to do is transfer power along the cable from one character to a different character. If one character doesn't have any power, then you must transfer it one way, the only way it can travel. So that's really interesting because, people are trying to predict what you're going to do, and you're trying to set it up so that you can get power away from the people you don't want to have power and towards the people you do want to have power. But after you've made a transfer, then you have to change one end of the power cable. So if iron is plugged into toaster, then you can move it away from iron or toaster and put it somewhere else. And so it very quickly becomes apparent that actually getting the lowest number in the trick is more desirable than winning the trick, which is weird. So it's a really weird trick-taking game, but the majority of your points are going to come from your secret agenda cards, which you'll have been dealt at the top of the hand. And you'll get 8 cards as well. So we're going to play 8 tricks per hand. At the beginning of any of your turns, you can choose to reveal your secret agenda card, or you can keep it secret the entire game. Now, on your card is 2 of the characters, and it's mirrored, so you can orient it either way up. But when you reveal it, you will place it so that the character on top is your bet for most power, and the character on the bottom is your bet for least power. So you've got a character with toaster and iron on it, and you reveal it with iron on top. You're saying that iron will have the most power at the table at the end of this hand, and then you're trying to make that happen. When you reveal it at the beginning of your turn, you will get points at the end of the round based on how many cards were left on your hand. Functionally, this is saying reveal early for more benefit. But by revealing it, you lock in the orientation and telegraph to everybody what you're trying to achieve. So then they can try and thwart you. You can choose to keep it secret the entire time, which has the benefit of not telling your opponents what you're trying to achieve. Additionally, you can actually choose the orientation at the end of the round when you know all the outcomes, which can be helpful. However, if you're trying to drive towards a certain specific outcome, then it's not that helpful, really. The thing about keeping it secret the entire time is you become what's called a conspirator, and it becomes all or nothing. What that means is you have to be right about both halves of the card. So not only does your bet on who has the most power, but your bet on who has the least power, they both have to be right. And if they're both right, you get 14 points, which is a fair amount. It's not like a huge amount, but it's a lot. If you're wrong, though, about either, you get nothing. Whereas if you reveal it during the round, you get if you get half points. So if either one is right, you'll get half the points you're entitled to. All of this stuff I really, really like. You've got sort of hidden scoring, secret scoring, betting, trying to thwart other people, trying to, play this weird trick-taking game. That was all great. So the other thing I mentioned about the deluxe components. At the end of a round, you trade in your power for these statue pieces. It's thematically you're building a statue in your honor, and whoever builds the statue first will become the new leader, I guess, because all we really care about is appearances and who's immortalized in stone. So the statues in the retail edition are just little cardboard tokens, and you build the statue lying down in front of you. In the deluxe edition, they're wooden components that you stack up, and everyone loved them. Everyone really, really loved them. I gotta say, the toy factor of those was very high. And actually, you could tell that they knew that because in the rule book it said it actually gave an order in which people get to draft the statue pieces, even though there's no function to them. They're just indicating you have 10 points. That's all they do.
Fair, yeah.
But they're like, no, if you finished first in turn order or whatever, then you get to draft the first piece of your statue. If you're entitled to 2 pieces, then you have to let everyone have a turn before you take your second piece. And it's like, because they know that people will want to grab the pieces that they want because it's satisfying and pleasing, despite the fact that the different pieces have no actual bearing on the outcome of the game. But so the problem was when we got into the final hand, again, everyone kind of revealed their agendas at some point during the hand. So we all knew what everyone was trying to achieve. And this led to quite a dissatisfying final hand where the player who played the lowest number in the final trick was trying to decide how to move the power cable. And really, they realized actually the decision they made was who would win, which of the other 2 players would win.
Right, yeah. So
they couldn't fix it so that they won. And because all the points are open, it was entirely calculational. So they could just sit and work it out. So the game kind of came to this grinding halt while they had to do all the math to work out who was going to win, and then worked out that they were just choosing someone else to win. And that was it. And it was just a toss-up about which player they would pick to win. And that was really anticlimactic. So that was a shame. I think if somebody hadn't revealed their agenda, it would have been way more interesting in the final round. I don't know if that would have meant that person was more likely to win, but obviously, in this instance, by all revealing our agendas, which sort of locked in all of that open information. And unfortunately for the player who was in control, they couldn't orchestrate their own victory. But, if they could have, they would have, right? So I guess there is something to be said for, because the game is really, really close across the other 3 hands. So I guess there's something to be said for keeping your agenda secret in the final round. I think that if I were to play it again, I would be tempted to house rule that the final player, like who doesn't, the last player to reveal their agenda, is not allowed to. So there's like a secret agenda every round. Something like that. Just to keep some scoring hidden. Because without any hidden scoring, it becomes too calculational.
Mm-hmm.
But otherwise, very enjoyable. And everyone who played it would be, they did say they'd happily play it again. So I think if you like weird trick taking, definitely check it out. Just be mindful that it can just become maths at the end if everyone reveals their hidden agenda.
Sounds interesting. Maybe a few layers too many for a trick taker, but...
It doesn't feel like it. Once you're playing it, it feels fairly apparent.
Okay.
But you got to check out one that I talked about, or maybe you talked about it. We both talked about it in the last episode, and then I didn't get to see it.
Sad for you.
Excited to hear how you found it.
Too much to be seen in the time that we were there. But yes, I played Black Metro. So this is a game from Absolute Ascendancy, designed by Amesh De Souza. And the artist on this one is Diego Sanchez. This is a slightly larger game, sort of worker placement, area majority game, with personal public objective based scoring. And the demo that we played was very, very smooth, very polished. Everybody understood what was going on from very early, because the game does flow in a manner that makes sense, and what you're doing makes sense, and what you're getting from it makes sense. On your turn, you'll take one of your workers, or one or more of your workers, and put it into an area. That area has an ability that will trigger once everybody's placed their workers. If you have the most in that area, you'll score a point, and you'll get to trigger the secondary ability of that location. Ties are friendly, so if there's 2 singletons in there, you'll get both results. You won't get a point because you won't dominate the area, but you'll get to use both abilities. So there's a nice little scale between, okay, well, do I just go in here to tie, or should I go and try and take it over to deny my opponent the points and the abilities? Each round you gain additional workers, and so whilst you start with only sort of 3 to begin with, and maybe you'll go in for a tie, or maybe you'll just take a new area because nobody else is in there. Later on, you're going to be competing for these spaces by sending multiple workers in. And the important part is you can't reinforce. So the amount of workers you send in there to begin with is what you're limited to. If a player comes in later, the new element of putting in, I'm going to put in 3 workers because I don't want anybody to come in after me, because spending 4 workers would be too many in this round, or whatever that may end up being. You can also upgrade your workers to be worth like a grande, right? So you go from a little 1-pointer to a 2-pointer, but it still just counts towards one of your worker slots. And yeah, everything just worked really well. Everybody that played it with 2 of my friends, and we got a random person to come in. We all picked it up very quickly, and it all just worked. My only real concern about the game would be perhaps a lack of meaningful randomization. The objectives that come out are player controlled. However, players do have the option to change those objectives, but the whole deck is open to players. So you can choose which one you want on any given round if you take the change objective action or win the change objective space. Same with your tech upgrades. You're able to build any tech you want from the level 1s and then into the level 2s. There's no requirements on them other than you've already built the level underneath. So you'll always be able to choose the tech you want, the objective you want, by taking those actions. And I worry that gamers will figure out quite quickly what the best ones are. Now, just to give you an idea, some of those objectives are have the most steel, have the most information, have the most gold or money kind of objectives, but other ones have the most fortifications on the board, have the most workers, those kind of things. And so there's definitely probably there's probably a path that players will prefer, but maybe that will change based on player count and based on what other people are doing. And there's a sort of risk reward mechanism for a lot of the secondary actions where you're taking stress to get those secondary resources or abilities or new mission cards or whatever they might be. And so there's a sort of push your luck where you're taking on more and more stress. At some point you'll have to go to a space that's going to let you reduce that number, and otherwise your resources are going up and down based on what you're building, what you're doing on the board. Without going into a full breakdown of the rules, that's a reasonable overview. But I had a really good time. Everybody played had a really good time, and it was really, again, I'll say the demo, super smooth. Everything made sense right off the bat. The thing that prevented me from buying it, because it was available there to buy, are the components. And the components of the score tracker, of your resource tracker, of your workers even, are sub the standard for where you'd expect the modern game to be. And to the point where I went online, had a look on the Board Game Geek forums, and the designer Ramesh is in there talking about that being a decision that he made to have these tiny components on the board. So your score marker is probably a 2mm by 2mm thing in your colour. And that means, yeah, sure, all four of them can stay on the same score space on your standard points tracker around the outside of the board, but they're very easy to lose, and they're not obvious at all. Your resource markers are technically engraved wooden pieces, but you cannot see what that's supposed to be. The information is just an eye, but you can just see that there's like a bit of a cutout on it. Those tokens are also way too small for what they need to be. And his justification for it was that he kept playing and they would knock over larger markers. And I'm just like, I don't feel like that's a problem I've ever had with any board game I've played. If you're stacking discs on top of each other, that's always worked for me. Same with the resource tracker, they could easily stack on the same space. Having them just be deliberately tiny makes no sense to what for what I've got. Your meeples are tiny as well. Even your large meeple is probably smaller than a normal meeple. Again, his justification was that by the time you get into the end game, some of these spaces can have 20 meeples in them. They'll more than fit with the size that he's gone for. I think you could have gone slightly bigger and slightly more premium components. So I'd be interested in playing somebody else's copy. It wasn't one that I was willing to kind of spend on, but if I was going to buy a bigger game, this was a potential one. And if he does do a sort of second edition or upgraded components pack, I may consider it, because everything else was a very enjoyable experience.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm just looking at the pieces here on on Board Game Geek, and it is difficult to assess.
Let me see if the pictures on Board Game Geek do it justice, please hold.
They don't really. It's hard to, now that you've said that the pieces are very small, I can tell, but it is hard to get a sense of scale without having the context, that knowing that they're small.
Yeah.
Most of the actual photos of the prototype, it's hard to tell. And then there's one photo of the whole board game, but you're like, well, they could just be,
Could be a big board, yeah. It's impossible to tell what some of those symbols are, really. Like I said, it was information in an eye, but that could be spray paint. That could be a bottle of water. I don't know. It's just not clear at all.
Mm-hmm.
For a large box game like this, and for when everything else was really nice, it was a little bit of a letdown to have these weedy little meeples that you're putting on the board, particularly when they're supposed to be, you're potentially combating other players as you play as well. So,
yeah, and the other thing about these sorts of things is it's like you might be like, well, you know what, I'll just deal with it. That's fine. I can handle it. But then when you're playing a game with a lot of player interaction, you want to play with 4 players. And somebody's going to have a problem, whether it's a sort of a fine mobility impairment, or it's a visual impairment, or it's just a distaste for tiny pieces or poor production quality. It makes it so much harder to get to the table. And people are like, well, why wouldn't we just play an equally good game that looks beautiful?
Yes.
So it's a pity, when these sorts of things hold back a game that is mechanically very appealing.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody else has bought it and they want to play it, I'm absolutely in. I'd like to play, all the way to round 9. I focused very early on building up my forts in an area because my mission was have sort of 3 or 5 or 7 points worth of strength in a single area to get the maximum points out of my mission. And then your fortresses are, again, these little 2mm things that the table presence of it is not. Nobody go to area 3 because I control that. I've just got 3 tiny little dubbers on that space. It was unimposing, shall we say, having spent 3 rounds building up my forts.
Yep, I can see those here, and they are very small.
Yeah.
Well, that's a shame. I'd really like to give it a try. I didn't, unfortunately, have a chance to go by the booth. It was just one of those things where we weren't able to schedule a demo, and the reality is for us who are so busy at these sorts of things, if we don't schedule the demo, it's just not going to happen. And different publishers take different stances on whether or not they will schedule a demo, particularly for media types. And I appreciate that not everyone wants to do it, and that's completely fine. Unfortunately, it just means we didn't get to try it. Which is a pity, because I thought this one looked interesting and I would have liked to give it a go. Well, who knows? Maybe we'll have another chance. We'll find out if Absolute Ascendancy are going to Essen. Maybe they'll have time there. Although I doubt it. That's even bigger.
Did you play one of the new releases of the con then?
I played what could arguably be the new release of the con. It is a game that you definitely have never played, Barry.
Not in real life, I'll give you that.
Fair enough. It's Lord of the Rings: Fate of the Fellowship. So this, of course, is the sort of pandemic Lord of the Rings, and it is designed by Matt Leacock. It's developed by Z-Man Games. The artists are Jared Blando, who worked on Steam, Lacrimosa, Cloudspire, and Mosaic, among others, and Corey Godby, Disney, who worked on Disney Arcana. Yeah, and it's designed by Matt Leacock, who made the Thunderbirds board game. So this is published by Z-Man Games, plays 1 to 5. It says here it takes 90 minutes. Yeah, sure, based on player count, I reckon 90 minutes is about right. Could be, give or take, half an hour based on player count. Barry already did kind of a rules summary of this, so I'll just give a very high-level overview. But it uses the system from Pandemic Fall of Rome, where you have little guys appearing on the board, and then they're going to move along paths, and they're going to appear at, if you know the world of Lord of the Rings, I can't explain Lord of the Rings, so if you don't know the world of Lord of the Rings, I mean, do you like Pandemic? Do you like Pandemic Fall of Rome? If yes, persevere with this. If you don't, again, this is not really going to change your mind. If you dislike those games, this is not going to change your mind. If you're not sure about Pandemic, but you really like Lord of the Rings, if you want a light cooperative game, you may well enjoy this. But here's more information. So the baddies appear on the board at the dark strongholds. They move along these little paths, and they're going to stop off on a tourist's journey of Middle-earth with the end goal of getting to the light side strongholds. And if they invade the light side strongholds, they'll burn them down, and you will suffer despair. Amass enough despair, and you lose the game. So you have to try to get hope to counteract despair. The hope track does tap out at 8, though, and if you do get hope after maxing out the track, you just get a polite clap. Well done, you, but you don't actually get any in-game benefits. So you have to try to balance hope and despair. What you're actually trying to do is destroy the One Ring. You will, as the good side, have the characters from Lord of the Rings. You can put them out as you want. Some are more difficult than others. So, for your first game, it's recommend you play with all the best heroes like Aragorn and Gandalf. You always have to have Frodo and Sam, who are going to try to get to Mordor and destroy the ring. The game itself uses card deck just like regular Pandemic, where all the cards are locations. They also have a secondary function, which is an icon that does different things. So you've got rings. The primary function of rings is to amass 5 of them. Frodo needs 5 to buy the objective that lets him destroy the ring. So that's, I suppose, one of the major changes from regular Pandemic is that this has a series of objective cards. And there are many more objective cards in the game than you would play with in a single game. So you can mix and match them. This is one of the ways you'll make it harder by adding more objectives and harder objectives to future games. There is a set of recommended objectives for your first game. I believe that the Board Game Arena version offers what's known as the introductory game on easy and standard difficulty. You can correct me if I'm wrong about that, Barry. But
no, I believe that's right. The same 4 objectives.
Yeah. So we chose to play on that setup with the standard difficulty. So just slightly more Skies Darken cards, which are the infection cards from Pandemic. So those objectives and those variable objectives is sort of slightly new. The dice are not something you'd see in standard Pandemic. You've got these dice, and functionally, there are 2 sets. One is for resolving combat to see who will die in the combat, how many good guys, how many bad guys. And the other is for resolving Sauron searching for Frodo. So this is, again, another new mechanism. Frodo will move towards Mordor or around the board. More on that in a minute. But as Frodo crosses into different regions of Middle-earth, the Eye of Sauron will follow him, as well as the Nazgul. And as Frodo moves, he must make search rolls, and he'll roll a number of dice based on the presence of Sauron, the Nazgul, and also the enemy soldiers might be in his area as well, which will add more dice. The dice just generate despair, but if you throw too many of them too often, you'll probably bottom off that despair track and lose. So you don't want to do that. The other thing is that it's changed the system slightly, in that in normal Pandemic, we all know how you resolve an infection card by pulling a card off the bottom and infecting that city. Now, what you do is when you pull a Skies Darken card, which is this game's version of the infection cards, you will actually pull a so it has a area on it that gets filled with troops. But at the end of each round, you'll also pull cards off of a separate deck, which is sort of like the enemy forces mustering and manipulating. So because cities aren't getting infected in the same way, but troops are moving around and Nazgul are moving around, and the Eye of Sauron will generate despair if it's looking at Frodo when you pull these cards from time to time. You will want to be trying to sort of manage all of that, but it is a separate deck to the location cards that you're using typically for their symbols. And you got the rings that let you destroy the ring. The objective to destroy the ring is always in the game. You've got friendship tokens that will let you complete objectives around the board and let you recruit more soldiers for the good army. You've got swords that will let you reroll the combat dice. You've got stealth tokens that are primarily needed for movement. You can also spend them so you don't have to roll the black search dice when Frodo moves. And all that kind of stuff. So you're sort of managing your hands, trying to get the tokens to where they need, or the symbols to where they need to be, and all within the context of trying to get Frodo to Mordor. So we played the 4-player game with someone who was super across the rules and across the strategy. It was the developer of the game. So we're just very fortunate that we sat down to play it, and we had 2 copies, and we had so many people that wanted to play. We split into 2 groups. And then this American guy comes over and he's like, "Are you going to play Fate of the Fellowship?" And we're like, "Yeah." He's like, "I developed that." We're like, "Do you want to play it?" He's like, "Okay." So that was great. So shout out to Kevin from Z-Man. Thank you so much for your support. We had a really nice time. Now, I am conscious that, one, the table presence of the game is actually really nice. It comes with a big, what's the name of Sauron's tower? I keep forgetting.
what his name is there? Is he Barad-dûr?
Barad-dûr, I think so. Yes, Barad-dûr. That sounds right. So it comes with a big Barad-dûr dice tower that you get to throw the dice in. All of the Nazgul, and there are 9 of them, are separate models with little flying stands, and they fly around the board, which is great. Comes with tons and tons of tiny little dudes who are going to run around and be the little soldiers. Comes with nice meeples to represent all the characters. So the table presence of the game is very, very nice. Very well presented. It looks actually like it costs more than it costs, which is something. Although putting together the dice tower, something of a challenge. Once it is assembled, it goes back to the box assembled, fortunately. So you don't have to do that again. I mean, you have to like slide 2 pieces apart, but it's much easier than putting it together in the first case. So, I think you were saying that you had an instance where Frodo sort of arrived in Mordor, and then you just had to wait till you drew the ring cards. And there is a sort of something of a danger to that, because when you do the objective to destroy the ring, you also have to roll the search dice. And the search dice, of course, is equal to the number of Nazgul. The longer that Frodo loiters at a location, the more likely that area is to fill with the Nazgul. So waiting is dangerous. And so what we got was this sort of strategic insight from Kevin that, like, don't put Frodo in Mordor too early, wait till you have your rings lined up, that sort of thing. I mean, stuff we probably could have intuited anyway, but at least, we got some of these sort of higher level heuristics earlier, because we were playing with someone who'd played before and knew the game quite well. And I think that made for a much more enjoyable experience, because I do think if we just got Frodo to Mordor and he was just sitting there and we were just trying to find those cards, that would have felt like a bummer. But because we sort of lined up everything and we were taking more care to try and sort of get the timing of things right, we did very well at the game. We actually ended up sacking Mordor with an army led by Gandalf and Aragorn and Merry and Pippin and all these soldiers taking Frodo to Mount Doom. So that was good. Well, all the orcs sat around in Udun going, what the hell is going on? But, it was an enjoyable experience. I know that you can play the solo mode two-handed or using the official solo mode, which is supposed to be harder. Whereas the multiplayer mode, or like it's sort of set up to be more difficult. I don't know if that's to account for the fact or what it's trying to account for. Anyway, my resolution is, I think if I just played this straight out of the box without really knowing how it played, it might have been, how to do well at it might be a little obfuscated, because I think how to succeed at it is very much like Pandemic, in that it's really all about hand management and getting the icons where they need to be in the right hands. And I'm not sure if that challenge is necessarily very apparent, because looking at the game, it almost feels like it's so sort of distinct from Pandemic. It almost feels like, to be good at it, you get Frodo to Mordor and you try to win the little battles that are happening. Try to convert the enemy strongholds and not let your strongholds fall. But actually, if you're doing all of that, but you're not engaging enough in hand management and making sure the right icons are where they need to be, then you won't win. Or if you do win, it will feel, you'll feel a bit, I guess, like Barry felt, which was waiting around for the right cards to come up. But I enjoyed it well enough. I would definitely play it again. I had a nice time with it. I do think if you don't play a lot of cooperative games, or if you really, really like Pandemic, you'll enjoy this. It could be a nice sort of entry point. It's relatively thematic. It introduces sort of interworking mechanisms in a way that's quite pleasing. But as Barry said, ultimately, usually because you're sort of doing crisis management, and it really is just about kind of hand management, but where the hands are split up into multiple hands, the actual scope of the decision space is not very high. Typically it's like, I need to run over here and put out this fire. I need to get Frodo this ring card. You're not ever really stopping to think like, okay, I've got like 4 options. What am I going to do? It's more like, no, I need to do this now.
Yeah. Like I said, I didn't have a great time with it. I was playing the official solo mode, so I didn't even have the opportunity to swap cards. That's not something in the official solo mode, because all the cards are in one hand. So it's, I guess, whatever balancing they've got for the two-handed solo versus single-handed solo is because you don't have to switch cards, but then you're just waiting on drawing them because there's no other way of getting them.
Yeah, and I can see, there are certain characters that have abilities that let you get tokens that can be used.
Yeah.
But they can't transfer tokens between them.
But playing solo, you have access to all those tokens.
Right, so you have one pool of tokens as well.
Correct, yeah.
So I feel a bit like, Kevin was telling us that he thought the solo mode was harder. And, this was all sort of casual chit chat, so don't take any of this as official, statements or anything. But that sounds to me like it's easier because I feel like the hand management and the coordinating of the different players is sort of like the challenge of, or one of the core challenges of Pandemic.
But it took me 5 games to win, so make of that what you will.
Yeah, I guess so. And a lot of the sort of the decision making comes from like, well, I'd like to go over here and put out this fire, but also I need to meet up with Frodo and give him this ring card, or also I need to be with him when we go into Mordor so I can spend my stealth cards because we don't have time to trade everything because it's actually quite difficult to set up trades. So like what order am I going to do that in? But I also appreciate that there is scalable difficulty. You can put in more difficult characters, you can put in more objectives, and stuff like that. So that's good, because we did win, albeit we had Kevin on our team. On the flip side, Chris and Deborah were playing with Michael on the next table, and Chris and Deborah are excellent at Pandemic. They played an awful lot of it, but they did also win their first game. So it's good that there's a scalable difficulty there as well. But like I said, I do think this is a decent title. I do think if you like Pandemic, you'll like it. I just think as a friendly warning for people that are thinking of picking it up as a light sort of cooperative game, maybe to introduce some people to like a sort of a gateway title, just be mindful that I think the biggest challenge of this is that some of the heuristics about what is best to do in order to win are not necessarily the most obvious, because you kind of want to get your situation organized before Frodo goes into Mordor, where everything gets more difficult to access.
Fair enough.
Time to learn about travel.
Yes, so in one of the least inspiring board game names, one thing I managed to check out on the Sunday was Viking Route, or Route, depending on how you want to say it. It's published by Ares Games, designed by Guido Albini, Martino Ciaccieri, who's done Deckscapes and the Detectives, which I enjoy, and Luca Maragno, or Maragno. I'm not sure if that's a hard G or not. The artist is Alberto Orso, and much like the table presence for Fate of the Fellowship, this game has a fairly incredible table presence and a super high toy factor once you know what's going on. So this is not what you might expect as a typical game from Ares Games, who are much better known for not just their Lord of the Rings properties, but sort of their combat-based, particularly 2-player War of the Ring and such like type things. This is a cooperative game of travel, which is where the Viking Route comes from. And the game comprises of... Wait, before I even try and get into this, they weren't doing full demos of the game. There was a lady who came over and taught us the rules, and the rules are really hard to grasp. No, that's not true. The rules are just really lengthy, and she did a fantastic job of explaining the game to us and what goes on. And then it's like, look, the rules are there, you guys just play for as long as you want. So we played through the first scenario because they only had the rules for the first scenario there. But they weren't doing full demos because it's so hard to teach and it's quite a lengthy game. That said, it's not a difficult game. Once you're on top of it, really straightforward. Each scenario has its own specific rules, sure, but I can't possibly go over all the rules. I'm just going to give you the overview as best I can. So there is a board with hexes. Tokens go on the board. You pick up those tokens. The monsters run that board. They'll attack your ship. But then you have full 3D Drakkar Viking longship, where you have your standees and different rooms you can go into and bits you can switch out on the ship, so different size sails to show how fast you're going, your weapons, the things that you're storing in the hold, all this kind of thing. And then in addition to that, on the main board with the movement, your ship is a magnet. No, that's not true. Your ship is a compass.
Mm-hmm.
And around the outside of the board are 3 ravens, each of which is a magnet. And in the middle of the board is a statue which represents the wind, which is a magnet. And the way that your movement is determined, or the direction of your movement is determined, is where those magnets, or what direction north is on the compass. And the strength of the magnets are such that as you move them around the outside of the board and turn the wind, the direction on your compass changes, and then based on the size of your sail, depends on how many spaces you move in that direction, when the cards flip over saying that things move.
Mm-hmm.
Super broad strokes. On your turn, you've got like 3 actions. You can move, attack, move. You can you can flip some cards to give you special powers. You can use your special character power. You can build up some tokens that you can spend later on. You can blow the horn to move the ravens, which changes the direction of your ship. A few things that you can do. The first scenario is you must get your ship onto 3 specific spots on the board to pick up the gems, at which point the Kraken appears, and then you have to fight the Kraken and defeat it. Throughout this time, you're being chased by Valkyries that are already on the board, and the Kraken's tentacles are attacking your ship. If your ship is ever so damaged, if every space on your ship is damaged, then you lose the scenario. And there was one point when all 3 tentacles and all 3 Valkyries were on the ship attacking us, and I'm like, well, this isn't going to go well. But thankfully, there's a random a random end of turn deck where different things happen. Either the Valkyries attack, the boss action happens, a special action for the scenario happens, the ship moves, the wind changes on these things. So you take your turn, you flip one of these cards, and thankfully, we had a couple of turns before the Valkyries attacked again, and so we did survive and managed to defeat the boss in the end. It was fun. The first time you move those ravens and see that the direction of your ship changes, and you're like, oh, that's interesting. Our very first action of the game, we crashed, and so we just reset that, because we didn't. The first thing I did was put the sails up, and then I flipped over a card at the end of my turn and it moved us, except I was still pointing directly into the edge of the board because it didn't move the ravens. And we're like, well, that's like 2 damage to start with. So I was like, wait a minute, what if I don't put the thing up and instead I move the ravens? So we just reset that quickly. But then once you kind of understand how you're going to steer the ship and what the actions are for it, it becomes quite fun. And then it is this sort of disaster management type thing where you're avoiding the Valkyries getting to the ship. You're shooting them with ballistas to push them further away because you can never kill them. The Kraken's tentacles are coming on board, and you have to fend them off, and you can't do the action in that space until you have kind of got rid of it. You're making sure you're not crashing into the island. You've got to go in the direction of the stuff you're picking up. There's other things you can pick up on the board, and then there's it's a campaign game, so in between scenarios you can upgrade your ship with better steering. Your starting steering, you can only move left or right, sort of one space, but with better rudders you can move multiple steps in one go. You can get better weapons, you can get better equipment for your Vikings. I think this is coming to Kickstarter. In fact, it's almost certainly coming to Kickstarter because we were playing with the exclusive character that comes in the Kickstarter, who is pretty powerful, able to get an additional free move as long as there was enough resources for it. And you need that really for getting around the ship to get to all the different spaces. And yeah, we had a good time. We played through pretty much the whole thing. We got to the end fight, we managed to do a bit of damage, and then at that point, we'd been there for maybe sort of, 75 minutes at that point. The rules were a good 20 minutes. And the lady that taught us was phenomenal. and I don't see how you do it any faster to get all the rules you need out there in the open at the start. But like I say, they weren't sitting down and doing demos because it was just so lengthy. And we've got a couple of bits of damage on the Kraken, but because the Kraken avoids you once it's visible, it was just going to take too long to chase it down and kill it. And so we let the other people in to have a go at the game as well. But it was a lot of fun. It's maybe not something I'm going to rush out and buy. I don't think I would play it often enough to justify it. But I think the movement of your ship and the magnets and the things that are going on were all much more interesting, particularly for a co-op, making sure everybody using their powers right. It's like, well, I want to do this on my turn, but there's not enough clan powers. Could somebody go before me and generate sort of the resources we need so I can do this action kind of thing? Or you're stuck in that room until you get rid of that tentacle, but we really need your ability to go and do something else. So why don't I go first? I'll come in and I'll kill it, and then you can spend your actions getting back out and doing what needs to be done. Very free flowing. You can do your players can take their turns in any order, but only obviously once per turn. And the mechanism for failing other than your ship blowing up is the deck of cards that dictate the Valkyrie movement, the attacks, the special actions of the enemies. Once that runs out, it moves along the Ragnarok track, and if you go through that deck enough times, Ragnarok will occur and you've failed in the broad mission of the campaign. So we had a good time. Played, as I said, most of the whole first scenario. The other scenarios, they had the boards for them, but they didn't have the rules. So I think this is still yet to come to Kickstarter.
I was going to jump in there, Barry. Actually, that's not true. It funded.
Did it?
It was on Kickstarter last December.
Okay, so it might be delivering soonish then.
Yes. I'm just trying to find out if I can find out that. The latest update says they've improved the magic horn.
Okay, excellent. Well, balancing the the magnetic push of the wind and the magnetic pull of the crows is a tricky one. We eventually ended up with sort of two crows side by side, and it made us go the right direction along the edge of the board. But as soon as we passed that first crow, suddenly we were pointing at the second crow, which was off the board. And I was like, hold on. Either we need to move this next one, or if we flip a movement at the end of our turn, we're going to go crashing into the side again. But I believe the scenarios are, I guess they probably have them on the Kickstarter, but Fenrir's in there. The Kraken was the first scenario, as I mentioned. I guess you might get plastic pieces for your characters as well. We were just using standees.
There is a Jarl edition with miniatures.
Okay.
It's not actually all that expensive either. It's a difference of £8 for the 4 Viking miniatures.
Fair enough.
It looks like the sort of roadmap says that the pledge manager closes in March this year. Obviously, it's now June. It is still open, I think, so you can still actually go to the Kickstarter page and late pledge. It says it's going to be shipping. They're going to start shipping in July and start fulfillment in September. But the latest update seems to indicate this is all delayed because of the tariff situation in the US. Gotcha. So I guess they've decided to keep the pledge manager open. So I don't know how long that's open for. I didn't read all the updates, but if you want to check this out further, you can still find that on their Kickstarter page.
I'd say definitely check it out, see if it's for you. It was, if you're after a co-op game, the system's pretty smooth, and the interesting part of moving the magnets around works pretty well when it comes to navigating the seas.
Yeah, I mean, I like the novelty of the ship movement and the idea of sailing the ship around. That's really appealing. It says here that there's a campaign mode, which is what you've been talking about. There's also a standalone Ragnarok mode, so you can play that, I guess, if you're, just wanting to play a single
A
game.
one-off.
I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, one-off. I don't know how long those sessions would last, but it's nice. It's also not that dear. It's £65 or $65 US dollars for the Jarl edition with the miniatures for Vikings, and then the Viking pledge is $55. So all in, it's not going to break your bank if you're used to those much more expensive Kickstarters. And at least with Ares, because it doesn't look like they wanted to raise £11,000. They raised close to £20,000, which for a game this sort of, I say ambitious because it's got some miniatures and magnets are notoriously difficult to ship. For a game that didn't overfund, it might seem quite risky, but Ares is a very sort of reputable company. They've been around for a really long time, so I don't think you're in any danger of not getting your pledge either.
Agreed.
Yep, I like the look of that.
If you get a chance to play it, give it a go.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to take a complete detour from the UKGE now and talk about a game I played with my friends yesterday, one of whom bought this at the UKGE. So there's the link.
Right.
All right, you're welcome.
Tenuous link.
Tenuous link, exactly. So this is Pest. It came out in 2024, apparently. We were trying to pin down exactly when this appeared and when it came out. It's a Euro-ish game. It was a Kickstarter, and it delivered sometime. And a friend of mine bought a copy at the convention, so we played it. It is designed by Thomas Nielsen, who also designed a game called Vegin, and Kai Stark, who also designed a game called Vegin, Galaxy Postman, and Light in the Dark. The artists are Daniel Kuna, who did Tiny Epic Game of Thrones and Vegin, and Sarah Stokeska, who did Magna Roma. The publisher is Arcana Games. You can play 1 to 5 players. It's 2 hours to play. We played 4 players in 2 hours, but we were moving pretty quickly because we only had 2 hours. And I won't go on too much about Pest because it's a Euro game and you are plague doctors and you're curing the plague. You're wandering around the board and you're going to get, it's sort of, it's a balance of crisis management and point generation. You're going to get points for pulling the various levers and doing the various things in the game. There are 3 eras. Each era gives you a couple of objectives you can use to get points. Most of your points at the end of the game will come from building buildings in the various towns on the board, will come from engaging in those objectives around or era to era, and also competing on what's called the renown track, which is just a sort of first hierarchy, and there's some bonus points at the top. But what you're functionally doing is wandering around these towns and picking up sick people who are suffering from the plague and then curing them, at which point they will move to your healthy track and start working in your laboratories. They'll generate science for you and also points. However, you can put them to work in the buildings that you've built to generate the other resources in the game, which are, of course, the staples of all human society: bread, rock, wood, medicine, and money. And so they'll work in your buildings, generating those things for you, which you will then need to continue to move around, pick up the sick people, and cure them. It uses it's sort of, I guess it's not worker placement because define worker placement. It's got an action selection system where you've got a couple of actions on your turn that are represented by little guys, and you'll put them onto this action selection board, which is, you will have seen something like this before, I'm sure. If you've played Video Game Champion, it uses the same sort of thing, where you've got a grid with the actions along one side and the top. And when you put the worker down, you get to take the 2 actions that intersect, and you can do them in any order. And, the actions are building the buildings, moving the sick people around your board to staff the buildings. You can also move them to the capital for a little Benny. You can cure the sick people. You can move around the board, collecting more sick people. You can construct the buildings from your player board. You can trigger production to produce the resources you need. And you can also research technologies. You can hold 3 technologies and they each give you a little power, and they're asymmetrical in that, there's only 1 copy of each card and they're all different. As we move through the rounds, we're going to award those round-to-round objectives and then move on. There are 2 objectives per round, which is quite nice. One that gives you some reward for doing a specific thing, like maybe moving around and picking up sick people or building houses in towns. And there's another reward that's going to check at the end of the round how much of something you've done. Like, how many buildings do you have in the same town as another player? Get a benefit for that. So you're sort of managing those two criteria as well. And then on top of that, there's also sort of a system in the background where if towns overflow with sick people, they're destroyed, and that's bad. You've also got to worry a bit about sick people randomly appearing in the town where you are, because then you'll automatically pick them up, and you can only carry so many sick people, and then they'll overflow into your action spaces and diminish the value of your actions. So you need to cure them to stop that from happening. If sick people destroy the town where your buildings are, the buildings can be destroyed as well. Like, it's got a lot of these sort of thematic elements going on and everything like that. But on the topic of presentation, its style is very inconsistent. Like, the style is all over the shop. You've got miniatures representing your pieces, but they're the only miniatures in the game, unless you have the deluxe capital, which is in the center of the board. But if you don't, then they're wooden pieces, and they don't really gel with your miniatures. And then you've also got these little tokens that track the resources on your player board, and they don't look like they belong to the same game. I wouldn't necessarily complain about this sort of thing, but it was really hard to get a sort of a sense of tone from the game, because like, you got all these sick people and they're dying, but then the game itself just feels like a real sort of midway Euro. You're just kind of wandering around and managing some resources and doing a little bit of crisis management. Albeit, my friend advised that we seemed to have a very pleasant game, where we were lucky that the sick people who were appearing were not necessarily concentrated. So we didn't have to worry too much about towns being destroyed or the penalties that come with that. Which I guess that's nice, but also I guess it's a bit inconsistent. I don't know if that's a problem, but I thought that, like, without that system putting pressure on us, maybe the game was less exciting. In my one play of it was not very exciting. It was perfectly fine. But I was pleased that we were all playing very quickly with the 2-hour time limit, because I think if I was playing this with someone who got AP or was really sitting and planning out all their moves, I would probably have been quite bored. There's not a lot you can do in your turns. It doesn't feel like there's a huge amount of strategic horizons, Generally, you're just kind of following the examples to do the thing, or, following the objectives to do the thing that's best. It really felt like sort of a middleweight Euro with a little bit too much overhead, given its sort of not especially deep strategic possibilities. That's kind of my takeaway. And then the board was just impossible to read. Its color is really, really, really dark. Like I said, if you had an issue with the Brass Birmingham board, then you're going to find this board practically invisible. It's not awful. Like, I didn't hate it, but I certainly wouldn't pick it, and I wouldn't mind if I never played it again.
Fair.
Maybe if the pressure created by the plague situation was more impactful, it would be a tenser game. But I get the impression actually that it would just kind of feel randomly punitive. But I don't know. We didn't play it like that. The action selection mechanism of putting your people down at the grid didn't seem especially limiting. I mean, what was more limiting was that you only got to pick one action from each menu, so you couldn't, as your two actions, produce twice or build and move because they're on the same axis. Which is fine, but there are other, I guess what I'm saying is that the system seemed more interesting than the actual outcome was. So, yeah, that was Pest. It's fine.
Yeah, play many games like that. That's fine.
Yeah,
and it's brown rather than beige.
Well, Pest is black rather than beige, and that's kind of a problem.
Super dark. Well, let's talk a little more about a game that is in fact colourful, and one that we managed to get a little bit of time with, though had to rush off for Forest Soufflé, and that is Chroma Arcana. This is published by Rock Nest Games and designed by Mo Shawa. The artists on this one, very important to mention because the art is very nice, is Val Fadul, Nadine Jakubowski probably, and Sandra Singh. And it is yet another head-to-head 2-player card game about battling wizards. So certainly nothing new thematically to the genre, but the game is really good looking, like the Chroma part of it, like the watercoloured art and the theme that comes through, and it's really nice. And I think I said at the time we were playing, the order of play and the decisions that you make do have it stand out as its own thing within the genre. It's not just magic, paying mana for putting a card out and then attacking with it. That's Magic the Gathering. In this game, you play cards into your spell book. You then have to charge them up by discarding cards of the same colour or a chromatic card until it reaches the amount of mana that it needs, and then you must cast it that turn. There's different types of cards. You can only have one ally out at a time, and allies like your summon, your monster. And every turn it's going to tick down and perform its ability, so you've got to have it out for a turn, leave it vulnerable. Your opponent can see what it is and react to it in time. Spells can be defensive and stay on the board. They can last for a turn. They can be permanent until something triggers them, or it could just be a spell that resolves immediately, often an attack. But it stood out enough that the system and the timing all made sense. It wasn't just a copy of anything else or everything else, and it was reasonable enough that it warrants a little bit more investigation. I think to determine if it's really any good, I would want to see a high level constructed deck. The decks that were playing during the demo didn't feel particularly powerful. They felt a little bit limited. There was no real plan of attack or anything within them, and that's something I think these sort of card game players or designers, I should say, need to think about, particularly when showcasing the games. Pack some good decks, some high level constructed decks, because I did swing round past Hub World Eidolon from the Earthborn guys, and they didn't have any constructed decks either. It was just the demo decks which we played before, and so both of these games I'm unsure of because I don't know what the game looks like by the time you're into it. Sure, the mechanisms and the format of it seem fine, but does it stand up to rigorous play is what I'm looking for in those games. I don't know how you found it or what you were thinking.
Well, I only got the briefest sort of introduction with it because I played, a few rounds with you, and that was all I saw. I liked what I saw. Generally speaking, I like multi-use cards where you can pay for other cards with those cards. So that's one of the ways you pay to play your cards in this game. You've also got a limited pool of cards you can set up, which has you thinking about that. And I presume in an actual game, trying to be really choosy about what you do and don't commit to putting down there, which is interesting. And then it's got this timing thing as well, where cards sort of have a lifespan. So, conceptually you're casting spells, and when you cast the spell, it might resolve immediately and go away, but in other cases it might stay in existence until its sands of time run out, which is functionally just a round timer. And that's interesting. I think there's some interesting considerations there, but I agree with you fundamentally. It's what we were playing with were sort of a series of what felt like quite basic cards to represent the mechanism, or to introduce you to the mechanisms of the game. And looking over at the box, there was a ton of different factions and different colors and things. And so it'd be interesting to see how the deck construction is managed and how much you're allowed to pull from. And with that in mind, how many interesting and different kinds of combos and strategies you can develop.
I will say the numbers are quite small. You've only got 9 life to start with, and I don't think you can go above 10. And so doing 2 or 3 damage in a turn is quite significant. Games seem designed to just go through your deck once, because when you reshuffle, you lose a life as well. And the few games that I've kind of looked at and what people were doing, it was meaningful. Losing that 1 life for reshuffling your deck was pretty much, well, actually, if I don't win this turn, either the deck's going to get me, or a combination of reshuffling the deck and my opponent's going to get me. So the games seem quite punchy and quick. I just, are they long enough would be my question if you were on a hyper aggro deck or something like that. So yeah, needs more plays to really come to a conclusion.
Well, hopefully we'll have a chance to explore that further in the future. I've got one final one here. This is nothing to do with UKG at all. I played it. I didn't talk about it in the last podcast because we were doing UKG and I wanted to talk about it, which is I played the War of the Ring, the card game Fire and Swords expansion. So this came out at Essen last year, and it is the second expansion for the War of the Ring, the card game, albeit the first expansion was just a solo and cooperative mode. This is Fire and Swords is a 2024 release, and it is from the designer Ian Brody, who has done War of the Ring, the card game, and the Quartermaster General series of games. And there is some overlap in those designs. The artists on Fire and Swords actually are uncredited on BGG, so I just decided to pull the artists from the original game because I imagine they'll be basically the same. It's Antonio De Luca, John Hodgson, John Howe, who's very famous for his Lord of the Rings art, Matteo Macci, Fabio Majorana, Francesco Mattioli, Andrea Peparo, Dimitri Prosvernin, Ben Wooten, and Kuo Yang. This is published by Ares Games, and the main element of Fire and Swords is that it increases the player count for 2 to 6. So you can now play up to 6 players instead of 4, like the original core game. I reckon this makes the game a 1 to 3 hour game, depending on how quickly someone wins or loses. And this is also not my copy of the game. I played with some other people. I actually don't have Fire and Swords, but I'll probably buy it. I do have the other 2, which were review copies given to me by Ares. If you don't know anything about the War of the Ring, the card game, it couldn't be less like the War of the Ring, the board game. It is much more like Quartermaster General, which is Ian Brody's other design. But what we're doing is we are abstracting the Lord of the Rings, and we're going to have 2 elements of the game. So it's a team game. So if you're playing, there are various scenarios, right, that you can play with at different counts. So you can do a 3-player game, which is one kind of scenario. You can do all these different scenarios. I've only ever played, you can play the 2-player game, which is just like a head-to-head thing, but it's still the same, a lot of the same mechanisms. But it really feels like it was designed as the 4-player game, and then quite naturally lends itself to the 6-player game. So in the 4-player game, you're playing 2 teams of 2. In the 6, it's 2 teams of 3. And it's good guys facing off against bad guys in Lord of the Rings. And it really feels like the sort of the 4-player game was the sort of intended way to play, so to speak. And every other scenario is just to accommodate different counts of players. What you're doing is each player has a deck of cards that represents some amount of Lord of the Rings. It will be different factions, like, the dwarves, the elves, the Dunedain. It might be characters who slot in with those factions. Like if you've got the Rohirrim, you'll have Eowyn and Eomer and all of that. So you've got to sort of contextualize. So each deck is like the characters. You have Sauron as well with all the Nazgul in their deck. And it's played over a series of rounds, 9 rounds, and at the end of round 9, whoever has the most points is the winner. However, at the end of any round, if one side leads by 10 points or more, they win. So there's always sort of this chance that it could go disastrously wrong and you just kind of lose. So you've got to try to sort of balance your scores and keep pace with the other player. And this is very interesting because each player has a deck of cards representing their forces. And what the core sort of dilemma of the game is when you choose to forsake cards. So what it challenges you to do is to do anything really exciting. You have to forsake cards and they go out of the game, and you're effectively milling your own deck. And you can run out of cards, and then your contribution is just nothing. You've got nothing left and you're done for the rest of the game, however long it continues. Probably not that long because you've got no cards left. So managing the available resources is the core sort of dilemma. And you're fighting your opponents over 2 different battlefields, right? One side is called the battlefields, and they represent the sort of the major, or it might be strongholds, I can't remember, but they represent the major battles of Lord of the Rings. So you've got like, Helm's Deep and Minas Tirith there, right? And then the other is called the Path. And these are these sort of more narrative events. It's Frodo and Sam's journey, really, that you're going on. And so you have to fight the path with characters. So you'll have character cards. The characters can go to the battlefields and fight alongside armies, or they can go to the path and sort of have this more abstracted, personalized skirmish. But if you commit your characters to the battlefield on the attack, they will die. When you're the attacker on the battlefield, you will always die. If you're the defender, some may survive. And so, again, that's another way cards go out the game, and they're just removed permanently. And so your forces and your capacity is just continuing to diminish. And what Fire and Swords adds to this sort of system is more factions. Humorously, all the factions nobody's really heard of. And it splits, so you can split those 2 decks into 6 decks, you can split the 4 decks into 6 decks and have 3v3. It also adds this concept of skirmishes, which are like lighter battles that people can commit a few troops to, and that can be resolved at any point on someone's turn, and there's a benefit for the winning side. So it's sort of like a mini battle that can happen during a round, whereas the battles in the path are usually resolved at the end of the round, albeit a lot of cards upset this process. I really like the War of the Ring, the card game. We've talked about it before on the show. I talked about being excited about this in the Essen Prep episode, which was like episode 6. So, I was very excited to have a chance to play this at full 6-player count. I decided to join the evil team, and I got what's called the Bill Ferny deck, which is the deck added by Fire and Swords. Bill Ferny is a ruffian that they encounter in the inn in Bree, and he's now like the only named character in that deck, because the Bill Ferny deck really is just like, the C tier cast of Lord of the Rings. But it's mostly armies, and I had a great time just triggering all these battles, while Sauron, who was playing next to me, was just like, what are you doing? We have to play it safe and be sensible. And I was like, no, come on, let's have another battle. I'm going to spend my entire deck taking Minas Tirith. But I had such a great time. I really, really liked the game. We did win it in I think it was round 6 or 7, which was lucky because despite the careful bureaucracy of Sauron, the Bill Ferny deck was almost completely exhausted, and the Saruman deck was only Saruman left, like 5 cards. So it was almost entirely done as well. So it was a good thing we won that round, because I think we would have been done if we tried to go any further. But it's I think, there's probably a fair bit of luck in the game. I observed that Sauron was very, very lucky to pull into 2 of their key cards in like the first round. Saruman found Saruman, the Black Staff, and the Palantir pretty quickly as well, which are pretty key. I don't care about finding anything because my deck's full of mooks, so I just have whatever random people show up. So we were quite lucky with our pulls, and I do think that's a facet of the game to be conscious of, but I do think that it's thematic enough, it's exciting enough, and the system is compelling enough that you're going to have a good time with it. And it's not that long, and it's pretty consistent in my experience as well. Every time I've played it, even when it's not being close, it's always been pretty enjoyable. So I do recommend War of the Ring, the card game. And if you are playing this mostly multiplayer and you think you might play it 6-player, then the Fire and Swords is a great expansion. If you're only playing 4-player, I'm not sure there's much here for you. But I actually don't know if you can use any of the cards in a 4-player game. It is more player count and more Lord of the Rings, if that is something that sounds interesting to you.
I will say the Epic Trilogy version that it introduces is quite good and quite good solo. I played a whole round of that and I was doing really well. I was keeping up, just kind of edging ahead. Got into like that 9th battle, that 9th round, and then I just lost by like 20 points. Like it was it was super close until then, and then I just got absolutely creamed.
So are you suggesting that there's a solo mode from Against the Shadow that incorporates Fire and Swords?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know that.
And you can set up the deck to introduce the Northmen and stuff as you go further along.
So that kind of wraps up the games that we played that we were going to talk about. These are things that are in their final form, but we have played a bunch of stuff that's not finished or isn't out yet or is still something of a prototype.
Yeah, and there was a lot of people at the expo, of course, and a lot of people there to drum up business and show off what they've been working on, get some last minute feedback, get some ideas from people, see how it's received as they're going along, and managed to get a few games of that in. They're maybe not the full thing, but enough to give you an impression of where they're at. And so one of the games I played that's definitely not yet launched was Cryptborn. This was on my list from last podcast. I definitely want to give it a go. This is a game from Misfit Hobbies and designed by Samuel Steele. It is a solo, not quite roll and write, but a solo, I guess it is a roll and write. You roll a dice, you write on a bit of paper. But there's a little more going on with it. However, having played the demo, I don't think it did this game many favours. So there was a copy, it was a game to play, and all you're really doing is rolling a dice to roll a dice, rolling a die to roll a die to roll a die. There were no decisions in it. It was more of an activity. And so I did speak to Sam there and like, well, what's in the full campaign, and like what else can you do? And it doesn't seem much more involved. So my initial you're given a grid, you roll a die to do, or you just pick somewhere to start, you roll a die, and then the middle room's that many spaces away, and then you roll a die, and the next room's, the boss room's that many spaces away. So you could just roll a 1 and a 1, and you only get 3 rooms. And then I was like, so my question was to Sam, well, why is it a grid if you only ever go in a straight line? And so we had to look at what was coming up and what he was working on in terms of branching routes. But the route always seemed to be, if the boss isn't down the first route that you've been in, he'll always be in the second route. And it just didn't seem terribly exciting. Like, it could equally have been a straight line, you just go into the next room. And so each turn you roll a d6, and that tells you what your encounter is. If you roll a 1-2, you get a combat. If you roll a 3-4, you find the treasure. If you get a 5, nothing happens. And if you get a 6, you get something cool. And you do that for every space between your starting room and your middle room. And then in the middle room, you definitely fight something. Can't remember. And then when you get to the boss, depending on who the boss is, you fight the boss. And to fight the boss, you just have to roll a die. And if your number's higher than their target number, take a damage. You roll a die for them. If their number's higher than their attack number, you take a damage. There's some special abilities on the bosses and monsters, but they're not terribly involved. So yeah, a little bit of a miss for me. I will say the person I was with said, oh, that looks like something I might want to do and play on my own. But I just think there's better ways of spending your time on a roll and write than what this game was promising. There may be more to it by the time the Kickstarter launches. So have a look and see what's new and whether it might be something you're interested in, but it wasn't setting my world alight, let's put it that way.
Fair enough. While we were over at Rock Nest Games, having a look at Chroma Arcana, we got to see a prototype for a new game that they'll be crowdfunding later this year. It's called Smallfolk. This is designed by Gloria Lau and Alfie Wright. This is their first design. The artists are Ver Fadul, who worked on Chroma Arcana, Angela Gubert, who did Cryptera, the Cryptid Pursuit, Nadine Jakubowski, who did Chroma Arcana, and Marina Passay, who did Cryptera, the Cryptid Pursuit, Nova Aetas, and Vrahod, Age of Prophecy. So this is a 1-to-4 player game, and I've written 2 hours. I don't know why I wrote that. I don't know where I got that from. That's not right. We finished the demo. To be fair, the hall was closing, and so we started a timer, and we finished the demo of a 4-player game in 25 minutes. I don't think it's supposed to be that quick. We were definitely rushing it to make sure we got the game finished. But it is a very light tableau building game. Functionally, you have your little heroes, and they're going to wander around a path, and on your turn, you can take cards from a face-up marketplace. You can maybe get cards face down from the deck. You will, on your turn, choose an action. The action could be advance along the track and do the action where you land, or the path. It's a map with a path. It's not just a track. It is just a track, but thematically it looks more interesting. And or you can play a card from your hand, which you will pay for, or you can maybe trigger a card that you have in front of you. Or you can trigger your hero ability. Everyone's got one hero ability, which is very powerful. And once you use it, it's done, but you might get an additional hero ability later on the path. And it's got a fixed pool of victory points in the middle, and once they're all claimed, the game ends, and then there's some final scoring, and whoever has the most points is the winner. And it really, really reminded me of Race for the Galaxy. And I said this to Alfie, and he was like, yes, I love Race for the Galaxy. So I can really see the influence there. Not so much in the action selection mechanism of Race. That's not really present here at all. But just in the way that you do the card play and the finite victory point pool as well. If you remember in Race, it ends when you build a certain tableau size or when victory point pool runs out. In this game, you can only end it by running out of victory points, but also your tableau does have a set size, which is 10 cards. But once you hit 10, you cycle cards out. So you would play a card to replace a card. And then it's got, much like Race, this way of paying for cards. You do have resources, which are little tokens that represent the different resources in the game, like food and money and water. I can't quite remember, so don't quote me on that. But you can also pay by discarding cards from your hand. So there's many ways to pay for the cards, which is actually really nice. Like you've got all these options that you're thinking about how you're going to pay for stuff. How can you find the money? You're like, am I going to, it's the very Race, like, am I going to hold on to this card because I'm really hoping to play it? Or am I going to ditch it now so I can play this card? Which is a nice dilemma. I really like that dilemma. Another nice thing the game did that I really liked was that it's got 2 actions for drawing cards. And I can't remember exactly what they call them now, but one is called like, I'm making this up. I can't remember. But one's draw and one's claim. And when you get the draw card action, you must top deck. And when you get claim, you may take from the marketplace as well as top decking. And what I really like about that is that it feels like they've used it quite judiciously to give people draw, to minimize sort of people fussing over the market and staring at the market and trying to, get too hung up on, like, if every time you got a card, you could claim a card from the face-up market, it would slow the game down and you'd be staring at all the face-up cards trying to make a choice. But if claim is less common and you're top decking more often, then it speeds the game up. And I feel like they've done that, which is really nice. I like that about it. So it moves along at a really good pace, which I appreciate. I don't think that there's any one mechanism in there that made me go, oh, this is the standout. This is the thing that sets this apart. It's relatively familiar. The presentation is really nice. The little map with the path on it is nice. The idea that you can you've got all these cards that can exhaust. And then when you get to the rest site, they all untap. That's nice. So there's sort of timing about the path and playing the cards and things like that. And you're sort of stopping to try to optimize the number of cards you play before you get to the first rest site. And the other people are just beelining off ahead of you and getting new hero powers. So that's cool. I like those considerations. The art was really nice, is very well done. You mentioned Chroma Arcana earlier. 2 of the artists from that are on this, and you can tell because it looks very pretty. There's another nice little mechanism because the cards, you can play them into your tableau and some of them just sit there and are worth points. Some of them give you a exhaust ability that you can sort of tap for an action. Some of them give you this gather function, which you'll only get when you rest at these rest sites. So it's an income. They improve your income at the rest sites. And then they also, some of them have a capacity to become happy. And the idea of the theme of the game is that you're sort of telling a narrative story. And so these different characters are going to become happy when they meet other characters in the story that they like, I guess. But functionally, it's like a set collection game where you're trying to match the characters in your tableau with matching sets, and then they'll become happy, and you put a little token on them to show they're happy, and you get a benefit. And I just really liked that mechanism. It was nice. It felt nice to be making people happy. And some of them were happy when they met animals, and some of them were happy when they met people that looked like them. And then there was a Ronin who was really powerful, but he was never happy. And that was funny. So it had a lot of character, and it was sort of like a solid, light tableau building game. I really liked it, so I'm keen to see what happens with the campaign later this year.
Yep, I didn't get a chance to play this one, but some people I was with did play it, and they were off the same line. It's like really solid, really nice. We're going to check it out once it hit Kickstarter.
Yeah, I think if you like light tableau building games, if you want something that's got, tableau building flavor, but moves along at quite a good pace, seems to scale well. We played it at 4, but it moved along at a good pace. If you're really trying to get it done, you could probably play it in half an hour at 4 players. It probably would be very stressful and not that much, be a different kind of game, but it could be done, so yeah. And just a really nice presentation. They said, they were talking about some of the aspirations they had as well for the nice components. So it'd be good to see what they present for the Kickstarter.
Cool. So one game I played that's still fairly deep in development, right? Not the finished version by any stretch, was Moby Dick: Wrath of the Seas. So this is Lamescape Games, who also done Don Quixote, which I think was available to buy this year. Might have been available to buy last year. Designed and drawn by Andrea La Rosa. So this is a project that I think's still, fairly early on. It's not finalised by any stretch. I know a lot of the abilities were looking to be changed. I know some of the triggers were looking to be changed, but the core concept of the game was there. In this game, which I think went up to 6 players, we played 3-player. Players will either be sort of Ahab or the first mate chasing down Moby Dick. If there's more than 3 players, then there'll be a second monster, which will be the giant squid, and then another 2 crew members kind of come out as well on that. But 3 players seem fine. You got the characters you knew in Moby Dick. And the game has a modular hex-based tiles, cooperative in as far as the people on the boats were working together and the monsters would be working together or working against each other in terms of Moby Dick versus Ahab and the crew. And over the course of 5-ish rounds, maybe, players were trying to get the most points, and the human players would get points for whaling and delivering whales and potentially injuring Moby Dick, whereas Moby Dick would get points for moving whales out of harm's way and capsizing ships for the players. And there's an interesting mechanism where players' boats get, I think, unease, unrest, something like unease, I think, and if you got enough of those, you would tip over and lose all your cargo. You could only hold 5 pieces, so it was never game ending, but if you're trying to deliver the whales that you caught, being tipped over by Moby Dick splashing you as you're going past was a problem. Each round, players put a card down. That card has icons. Those icons can trigger stronger abilities on your card, but you have an action like move, hunt, and different levels of hunt. There's like a D4, a D6, all sort of custom results on there. And maybe you catch a whale, put it on your boat, but the more whales you have in your boat, the easier you are to capsize, because the game only cares that you've got 5 pieces in your boat to tip you over, not that they're whales or unrest. I can't remember what it was called. There's a timer mechanism where you had to time picking your cards back up. So Moby Dick pulls tokens from a bag every turn, and that acts as like a countdown for how many cards you can have out. And so if you have too many cards out when Moby Dick, basically that timer counts down, which is random, then that move, you go sort of insane trying to chase the whale. You get the, again, I also forget what it's called, like the obsession. You become obsessed with trying to get the whale, and you kind of have to focus exclusively on that. And if that happens like 3 times, that sort of ends the game as well. And then Moby Dick's turns wasn't card based, it was just choose your actions, could spend air to do stronger or better versions of those actions. And at the end of every round, every 3 cards played, it's Moby Dick's the timer, but like every 3 cards played, Moby Dick would get an upgrade, and so they could make the waters more turbulent. They could improve his air capacity. He could get these little upgrades every round to become stronger and stronger. And so the longer you're out in the water, the more difficult it should theoretically become. played it and it was fine, but it was not it was quite old school in its feel. We ended up having quite a bad map, which the designer who was sitting with us teaching us said, like, well, I didn't want to say anything at the start, but you're 4 turns in, this map's really bad. We were stuck in like this tiny map, and so we were all just operating in sort of like the same 8 hexes on the board, because that's where the whales were spawning, and that's where the port was, and then the only spawn points were like in that corner. And the map's not big either, right? It's only 20 hexes or something, say. But we were all just playing around this one corner, and so Moby Dick was having a fairly easy time of splashing us, but he still wasn't really. We're keeping on a par. I think it's not terribly unbalanced, but I don't think anybody was having a lot of fun. Like, you were never getting away from being involved, but it also meant you couldn't really do much, and you just had to like catch a whale, take it to port, catch a whale, take it to port. If Moby Dick overspent his air, you could attack him to make him lose his last bit of air to score a point, but then he just refills again. You can never kill Moby Dick. And overall, it just felt like if it was going to be something I wanted to play, it would have to become a slightly bigger game than it was. And I know that the Llamascape guys are, their games come in these little boxes that look like books. And so it's never going to develop in that way unless something dramatic changes and not just balancing on when you get your better powers. I don't think, again, it's one for me. There's still room for that one to develop. So,
well, we'll see. We'll have to keep it out, see how that develops anyway, especially if you're a fan, any fans of Moby Dick out there.
I like what they're doing, making games out of, classic literature. So I'd be keen for it to survive.
Yeah, it's a nice idea. For sure, if they ever do Count of Monte Cristo, I'll have to check it out. I wonder if the game will be too long like the book.
Possibly.
So I've got one more. This is coming to crowdfunding later this year. Carta, Imperia, Rise of Rome. So this is designed by Mike Ebeji. The artist is Christian Foch, who did Catapult Feud and Escape from Flat Earth. The publisher is Gun Tower Games, which is Mike's company. And this is a 1 to 6 player game, although I don't know how you would play it solo, because it's not that sort of game. I've written down that it takes about 4 hours to play. We had a demo of this at the booth. We played through the first 4 eras of 6. This is a game where everything is tradable. So it's the fall of Rome, and everything is tradable. And actually, it's the rise and fall of Rome, really. Is it? I don't know. I don't know my Roman history well enough. But it begins during Roman history, and it goes up to, I think, era 4 is the arrival of Hannibal, and Hannibal starts sacking the city. And then more Roman stuff after that. Mike, clearly very across the history of Rome, clearly very passionate about it, has, designed this game to sort of represent that. We were all noble families in Rome. And you've got this board, which is the map of Italy and the surrounding area. And you've got 4 action cards that represent the sort of 4 actions in the game. And the first one's exploit, where you're going to get some income from the territories you control on the board. And this is kind of a fun mechanism, because there's like, you control these different territories insofar as they've been conquered by the Romans and brought into the fold, but now there's a governor. And someone will have installed their governor, so they get the taxes. But what's kind of fun is that when you exploit, if you played the card, you also get to exploit more of your territories, and you can Romanize them if you control enough of them. And that means they all become more profitable because you're functionally installing like Roman bureaucracy. So you have more rights if you play the card, but you kind of have to deliberate with the other players, because for every player that plays the exploit card, you have to pay more like managerial overheads per territory that you tax. So like ideally what you want is you play exploit and no one else does. But if other people want to do the same things as you, like tax more than one territory or Romanize it, then they're going to play the card too. So that's a fun balance that you have to strike. And then the next card you've got is Exec, where you're going to be able to trade you've got these sort of tokens that represent your political power, and you can turn them into a sort of better form of political power, where they are more permanent, so you're less likely to lose them. And additionally, they actually count as worth more power. There's some more stuff you can do with exec. The next action is extort, where functionally what you do is essentially just threaten another player and say, if you don't give me some of your political capital or anything, really, you can ask them for the governors, you can ask them for their private armies, like, give me some of that or I'm going to take you to court. And then if they don't agree to settle out of court by giving you some stuff, you'll go to court and you'll play this like rock, paper, scissors mini game, which is slightly slanted in favor of the prosecutor or the person that took you to court. You can also impeach the emperor. Like it's not called the emperor, it's called the prima something. But someone's going to have that card. It's the person who has the most political power has that card. They can be impeached. And if they're successfully impeached, they lose a lot of power. So they don't want to be impeached. And then the final card is Expand, where the armies of Rome will be shared amongst all the players who played the Expand action. And then you can take those armies, plus your private armies, you can go and conquer more areas on the map. There is an amount of sort of political capital and things to be gained here. People can piggyback off your battle, like you might go and invade a territory and be like, I'm going to get all this profit, and then somebody else is like, I'm here too, and you're like, no, get out of here. I don't want to share with you. And they're like, too bad, because I'm here. So everything is sort of tradable all the time. So like, for example, when the battle resolves, you'll share the political points that come out of that evenly, unless you agreed not to. Additionally, whoever was in there first gets to choose who installs a governor there. So you might make a deal with the other player, like, you give me all the political capital from this fight and I'll let you install your governor instead. And there is a real sort of inherent value in trying to sort of balance things out a bit, because one, if you stick your head out too far, it's just going to get chopped off. Like, everything's negotiable and everyone's always going to target whoever's winning. Additionally, you kind of want to keep people on side if you can. If you prove a sort of a worth or an honorable ally, so to speak, you're less likely to have people screw you over later when they can. And there's lots of opportunities to stab people in the back and screw them over. So it's kind of reminiscent of Versailles 1919, where you're negotiating the outcome of World War I as European powers. And like, you've got all these doctrines that are coming up and you're negotiating them, and you can stab people in the back, but because the game is long enough, you don't want to just make enemies of everyone all the time. So you have to sort of try to strike that balance of like getting ahead or betraying someone, but also like trying not to piss them off so much that they'll just have a vendetta for the rest of the game. Rise of Rome has elements of that for sure. And everything is tradable and you can just give everything away if you want. Obviously you don't want to, because you're trying to win the game ultimately, and at the end of the game, whoever has the most territory on the board and the most political power will be the winner. And there are these historical events like Hannibal that come in, and that upsets things, and Hannibal's going to try and sack Rome, and if you don't somewhat work together, then Hannibal might just sack Rome and everyone loses. So there's a lot of good elements like that. So I thought, like, if you're into that sort of stuff, if you like John Company, if you like Versailles 1919, these games are, that are extremely transactional, you'll probably enjoy this. My one concern might be that because everything is so transactionary, and also you can just kind of like screw people over and take their stuff, it might feel a bit like the first sort of 3 or 4 rounds of the game are a bit inconsequential, because it's all in flux anyway, and so it might be like, well, by the time we get to round 5, it looks nothing like anything that's happened before. But, to an extent, the sort of emotional journey of players by the time they get to that round might be very important. And additionally, Mike did say it ramps up a lot in the final 2 rounds. So we didn't get to see that. Of course, we only played up to round 4. And I think it was sort of a promising negotiation game, and certainly very true to the historical setting as well, which is always nice. Clearly made by someone who has a big passion for the sort of history of the Roman Empire, and not necessarily blinded by a sort of over-romantic perspective of it either.
Sounds interesting. Seems lengthy for something I'll play. Would you put it... You mentioned sort of John Company there. I guess that's another one that can go long, but one that's good fun.
It will be absolutely directly proportional to how much negotiation your table wants to do. You know, I've played those games where people are they have a very strong idea about what they think things are worth and what they're willing to trade. And with a table like that, which is very strong-minded, those games go a lot faster. Whereas with a table that's a bit more like which is a bit more like open to negotiation, open to trade, those discussions can go on, and the game gets a lot longer as a result. I don't mind playing either way. Like, I'm happy at both tables. I'm just conscious that it makes the game length very variable.
Fair enough. Is that one just coming to retail, or is that?
No, that's going to be crowdfunding, I believe, later this year. Very much a prototype at the moment, so we'll see. But you can find the page on BGG anyway. Carta, Imperia, Rise of Rome, and presumably there's probably some way to track it there, or you can check out the publisher's page, Gun Tower Games. Gun Tower is one word.
All right. So, all right, a couple of last ones for me. Then one of the games I managed to sort of play a full demo off, although albeit a shortened version, was Take the Throne. This is a self-published game. It is a 3 to 5 player micro game. Each player's got the same 5 cards with the same abilities, apart from the Monarch, who has a unique set of cards that they can choose from. Players play cards face down, and then everybody reveals in order, starting with the Monarch, and resolves any immediate abilities, and then once that's done, any end of round abilities, and then you work out who's getting points. Monarch's trying to keep being the Monarch, but there is a card, you give it up for a point. Other people are trying to become the Monarch, because that's one way of getting a point. If you've got the strongest army, for example, that will go in, but if 2 of the armies are the same strength, they kind of get knocked out, and then it goes to the next one down. So do you play your strongest army, your next strongest army? Cards will make players change the card that they put down, and that's kind of it for what was there for the demo. There was a couple of cards that they showed us afterwards that are looking to incorporate things that matter. Just give you an extra couple of choices, so you'd have 7 cards instead of 5 cards in your hand to play from. And it was fine, but the game was kind of too small to have any real fun. Bluffing aspect isn't particularly apparent because we were playing at 5 player, and we only had 5 cards. So, the chances of 2 players picking the same card was reasonable. Sometimes your card wouldn't trigger because the other person's already done it. And the choices you made, you had nothing to base your choice on, really, because you didn't know what any of the other players were going to do, and it didn't really make that much sense. It was just guessing for some of it, and in particular, when you have to pick a player that's not yet gone to swap their card. Well, who are you picking and why are you picking them? More than, do you pick the player to your left or you pick the player 2 to your left? What difference does it make to you if one of them's played a 3, one of them's played a 2? It doesn't help you making somebody else swap your card. So, yeah, it wasn't terribly exciting. If they add a few more cards, maybe it's got some potential. But there also needs to be something that gives you some information to go on for what you want to play that round. And whether that's like, an event or something comes up at the start, I don't know. But having nothing to go on, it wasn't particularly interesting.
Ah, fair enough. And that's by Death Trap Games?
Death Trap Games, that was it, yeah. Good find. I did get a nice full gold foil promo of the Monarch card whilst I was there, but alas, unlikely to be used. And then the sort of last game I played is another game I think is coming to Kickstarter very soon, and that was Restless Spirits by Sneaky Rascal Games. Actually, is there any artists credited? Because the art on that one was very nice as well. No, there's not at the moment. In this game, you are using a hand of items to attract spirits over to your side, and then you're using those items to fulfill their needs, which will score points and trigger abilities. There's a marketplace of items. There's the river of spirits, You can have 4 spirits at a time. You're working on collecting those items to do them, to fulfill what they're needing, and then you score them. You can trigger each spirit's ability once, and every spirit has a unique ability. But it's missing something because the decisions weren't super interesting. You can discard a card to the shrine to get a spirit, but it didn't really matter what card you discarded. If you just didn't need it, you could get rid of it. Maybe if you're playing at 4-player, we only play 2-player. Maybe if you're playing at 4-player, you'd have a look at what other players are trying to collect, because players can take cards from the shrine. Otherwise, there's a marketplace. You could just take an item that you're working towards, but the items themselves don't do anything. You just need them to fulfill. They're just resources for the spirits. The spirit actions can get you a blessing, or you can get a curse. You can play on another player. Sure, but really none of that matters anywhere near as much as just getting the item to fulfill the spirit. So much like the demo game of Cosmoctopus I once played, where I got 5 tentacles in like 4 turns, just had a really good combo stuff. I completed the demo version of this, which was 2 spirits out of the 5 you normally need, did it in like 3 turns. And it was just luck of the draw, kind of what came up. And I was able to combo some things off, but it wasn't particularly satisfying, and I didn't see where the real game lay in it. But once it's on Kickstarter, I'm sure they'll have like the proper rules up, and there might be a bit more to it than they were able to show at the time.
Oh, fair enough. It looks pretty.
It's very pretty. Speaking of things that look pretty, just one thing I will mention before we log off is that I did get a chance to look at Time Troopers. I was unsure whether it was AI. I did say I had to look at it quite extensively online, but it still looked AI. Looking at it in real life, none of it looks like AI. Much better in person. They need to do something to highlight that, I would argue, because online it visually looks quite generated. In real life, much better.
Did you get a chance to check it out?
Yeah, no, didn't manage to play a game. The demos were all booked up. I did manage, but we sat down with the developer and went over like how it plays and kind of what's going on. Yeah, it's a deck builder at its core. You're spending your time resources, which let you do certain actions. Your time is just like a card. You generate 2 time. You can spend that time to do something. Whether that's engage with one of the cards that's there, manipulate a die roll, which dictates kind of what bad guys come out that you got to defeat. Again, using your cards. Your cards have stats, and those stats you use to attack, defend, take damage yourself, do different things, solve the sort of mysteries and the puzzles for the time, not time loop. I don't know what the overarching story is. I know you're time cops to some degree, but I didn't actually catch what the main purpose of what you were trying to do things was. Like, it's okay, well, now I'm in ancient Egypt, cool. Okay, now I'm in ancient Norway, cool.
Oh, that is cool.
Yeah, and I was just like, I didn't really pay attention to what I was supposed to be doing thematically.
Fair enough. Well, hopefully we'll be able to check that out at some stage in the future. Is it coming to crowdfunding? Is that the plan?
I think it's just coming out, to be honest.
Well, that's good. It's nice when things are just coming out. It feels like a rarity these days, so that's always nice.
I just said publishers Molinarius, who've just done their, show Lotion Pods Lakes. This is a fairly large departure for them. I think I don't know what the relationship between the designer and Molinarius is.
Well, sometimes you just play a game and you've published something and you're like, I could publish this. It's great. If you've published one thing, then at least you know how to do that. But yeah, that's going to be closing up this episode. Do you have anything you're planning to play that you'd like to tease for the next one?
Hopefully the games that I purchased. I did actually trade in for Stardew Valley as well, so I wouldn't mind giving that a go. And otherwise, nothing I haven't played before, but always keen to play.
Exactly, and we're always keen to hear about the games that may have been out for some time, but are still making it to the table. I have a review copy of Line of Fire Burnt Moon, which is a little deck builder from Osprey Games that I'm keen to check out, and a review copy of Apex Legends, the board game, which I will break into at some stage. It's enormous.
Yeah, a lot of minis.
If you've enjoyed this content, then you can always let your friends know. If we've covered a game they might be interested in, then it would be good to let them know that we talked about it here. And of course, this is only possible thanks to our wonderful patrons on Patreon who are supporting the show, making sure that we can keep making this, keep it as independent as possible. I hope you can tell that we are independent and free to speak our minds and give our opinions. Certainly, we don't shy away from that sort of thing. But if you're interested in helping support that, you can always check out the Patreon page or subscribe to our media stuff. If you happen to want to see more UKG, I did post a ton of videos on the YouTube page, some shorts on the YouTube page. And, well, I say a ton. We posted some stuff there. It's fun. We posted some stuff on TikTok as well, which is fun. So you can always go, it's the same. It's the same. So just use the platform you like. But you can always go check those out. Otherwise, we'll be back in a couple of weeks.
Until then, bye.